The night is heavy over Europe. Mud clings to boots, rifles glint in the moonlight, and across the chill air of August 1914 comes the low murmur of soldiers waiting for dawn. In the distance, the guns are silent for a moment, as if history itself holds its breath. Yet, in our world, when morning broke, the war became a long stalemate of trenches and ruin. But what if the dawn had been different? What if the armies of Imperial Germany had moved with flawless precision, sweeping across the continent not into exhaustion, but into victory? What if everything had gone perfectly for the Kaiserreich? Before we step into this world of shadows and possibilities, I want to welcome you. Wherever you are listening, perhaps resting in a chair, perhaps lying in bed, with the quiet hum of your own thoughts, you are part of a circle stretching across time and memory. If you find yourself drawn into these explorations of history turned upside down, I invite you to press the subscribe button and join our journey. Together we will wander through a world that never was, and let its echoes guide us gently toward rest. Imagine now the crowded rail stations of Berlin, in that hot August of 1914. Steam hisses, whistles blow, and families wave farewell to sons marching in new uniforms. Posters declare that they will be home before the leaves fall, that Germany's destiny awaits. In our reality, that optimism soon rotted in the mud of Flanders. But in this alternate vision, the Schlieffen Plan unfolds not with delay, hesitation, or exhausted troops, but with a speed so relentless that it overwhelms France before it can draw breath. The scene begins with columns of soldiers moving through Belgium, their boots striking like drumbeats on cobbled streets. Instead of the stubborn resistance at Liège, imagine the fortresses falling swiftly, the gates opening as German artillery strikes with uncanny precision. Bridges remain intact, railway lines secured. Supplies flow smoothly, as though every timetable were written not by men, but by destiny itself. The French army, prepared to rush into Alsace, suddenly finds its flank exposed and its heartland vulnerable. Paris, that restless city of lights and revolutions, looks eastward with dread. Now picture the German armies approaching the Marne, not with weary feet, but with fresh momentum. In our world, that river became the grave of the Schlieffen Plan, the place where exhausted soldiers, overstretched supply lines, and determined French resistance stopped the advance. But here, the crossings are secured with brilliance. French counterattacks stumble, miscommunication spreads, and German cavalry rides into the outskirts of the capital. The Eiffel Tower looms, not as a proud symbol of resistance, but as a silent witness to an empire's triumph. One can almost hear the footsteps echoing on the boulevards as German soldiers march beneath the Arc de Triomphe. The air is tense, filled with the scent of horse sweat, gunpowder, and disbelief. Civilians peer through shuttered windows, clutching rosaries or photographs of loved ones. Some weep, some watch in stunned silence, others raise their hats in reluctant salute. And above it all, the German flag rises, a new shadow stretching across Western Europe. Would such a swift victory have meant peace? That is the first question this imagined history demands of us. On one hand, France humiliated, Britain hesitant, and Russia still struggling in the east might have sought a quick settlement, fearing the collapse of the old balance of power. The Kaiser, flushed with triumph, could have dictated terms in gilded halls, reshaping borders while his generals basked in glory. The dream of Mitteleuropa, an economic and political union centered on Berlin, could have been born not in treaties of compromise, but in the thunder of victory. But another possibility lingers. Victory can intoxicate. It can blind, as well as inspire. Would Germany, flushed with success, have pressed harder, demanding more, leaving no room for reconciliation? Would Britain, fearful of a hegemon dominating the continent, have stood alone, a defiant island across the channel? In this world of imagination, the roads split, and we are left to wander among them, never certain which one history might have chosen. Let us slow the pace and step back to look upon the faces of those who lived this moment. Picture Kaiser Wilhelm II in his palace, pacing beneath chandeliers, telegrams clutched in his hand, his mustache twitching with excitement. To him, this is vindication, proof that destiny favors his empire. His generals, Moltke and his staff, would in this alternate dawn feel not anxiety, but satisfaction. Yet behind their eyes, perhaps, a different worry flickers. What comes next when victory is too complete? And across the channel, in London, the cabinet would sit in heavy silence. Imagine the Prime Minister staring at a map where Paris lies under German occupation. The air is thick with tobacco smoke and indecision. Should Britain fight on, risking isolation and ruin? Or should it seek terms, preserving empire at the cost of pride? The Great Fleet still rules the seas, but fleets alone cannot defend a continent already conquered. The clatter of typewriters records speeches that will never be given because Britain hesitates at the edge of history's cliff. In Paris itself, the silence is deeper still. Imagine deserted streets, shuttered cafes, and the bells of Notre Dame tolling not in celebration, but in mourning. The French Republic stands on the edge of collapse. Perhaps a government in exile flees southward. Perhaps peace delegates already whisper with German envoys. For the ordinary Parisian, there is only uncertainty, fear, and the haunting image of boots on cobblestones. And yet, even in this perfect victory, shadows stir. For wars do not end neatly. The humiliation of France could sow seeds of resentment deeper than those planted in our own history. The pride of Britain might yet harden into defiance. Russia, though reeling, is vast and stubborn, a land that swallows invaders. Victory in 1914 may not be the end of conflict, but the beginning of a new and dangerous order. But for the moment, in this dream, Berlin celebrates. Crowds surge into Unter den Linden, waving flags, singing patriotic songs, tossing flowers onto the passing troops. The Kaiser appears on a balcony, raising his hand to a roaring sea of voices. Fireworks crackle in the night sky above the Brandenburg Gate, painting the heavens with crimson and gold. The air is thick with jubilation, but also with the faint metallic taste of destiny. It is a picture of triumph, yet one that leaves us unsettled. If Germany's plan had worked perfectly, would the 20th century have been calmer, spared the horrors of later wars and revolutions? Or would it have been a century reshaped by an empire whose reach exceeded its grasp? The questions linger like smoke after cannon fire, drifting across the imagination. And so our story pauses here, at the fall of Paris, with Europe trembling on the edge of a new order. The streets are silent, save for the distant echo of boots and the rustle of a flag in the wind. It is the sound of victory and the silence of uncertainty. Paris lies beneath the weight of its own heartbeat. The German flag hangs from the Arc de Triomphe, its folds moving gently in the September breeze. The streets are hushed, save for the occasional sound of a carriage wheel or the distant bark of a soldier's command. Cafes that once echoed with laughter and the clink of glasses are shuttered, their chairs stacked like skeletons of forgotten conversations. The great city, once the restless pulse of Europe, now seems suspended in a dream of defeat. We must imagine this silence not as a simple quiet, but as a heavy, oppressive presence. For in this alternate timeline, Paris has fallen quickly without the drawn-out agony of years of trench warfare. The trauma is sharper, sudden, and surreal. One day, citizens argued over newspapers in smoke-filled cafes. The next, they stand in doorways watching German columns pass. The contrast is jarring, like a storm that clears the sky too swiftly, leaving behind the scent of rain and the unease of lightning's memory. And what of daily life under such a shadow? Let us wander through the narrow streets of Montmartre. The painters still gather at their easels, but their canvases have changed. No longer do they paint carefree dancers or lovers beneath lanterns. Now the strokes are darker, the colors muted, as if the soul of the city itself has turned inward. A woman in a plain dress hurries past, a loaf of bread tucked under her arm, her eyes darting toward the soldiers who stand at corners, with rifles gleaming in the light. Children, curious but cautious, trace their fingers along the edges of bayonets when the guards are distracted. The hum of life continues, but it is altered, warped into something half-remembered. The French government, perhaps fled to Bordeaux or beyond, would find itself paralyzed. Ministers argue over telegrams, some demanding resistance to the bitter end, others whispering that honor lies in survival. Would France, proud and wounded, sue for peace quickly to preserve its colonies and its army? Or would it, like a wounded lion, bide its time, waiting for a moment to strike back? In this world of speculation, both possibilities shimmer like twin reflections on the Seine. And what of Britain? Imagine London in those same days. Cabinet members gathered around long oak tables, papers scattered like fallen leaves. The fall of Paris is not merely a French defeat, it is a warning to the empire itself. Some voices urge negotiation, fearful of standing alone against a triumphant Germany. Others argue that Britain cannot allow a single power to dominate the continent, that surrender here would mean subjugation later. The debate is fierce, yet behind it all is uncertainty. The Channel lies between Britain and Europe, a barrier of water that is also a barrier of resolve. The Royal Navy still commands the seas, but is that enough to challenge a Germany that holds the heart of Europe in its grip? The silence of Paris, then, is mirrored by the silence of hesitation in London. Across the Channel, the decision hangs in the air like a breath not yet released. If Britain remains out, perhaps peace comes quickly, a peace written not in compromise but in German ink. If Britain chooses to fight, the war shifts into a different shape: naval blockades, colonial struggles, a prolonged contest of endurance rather than swift battle. In this silence, the possibilities multiply. Let us return to Paris, where ordinary citizens must adjust to extraordinary change. Picture a baker in his small shop. He kneads dough with steady hands, the flour rising in soft clouds, the smell of bread filling the narrow room. Yet each loaf he shapes is marked by fear, for German officers may requisition half his supply by evening. He smiles politely when they arrive, but his heart burns with resentment. These small acts of survival, the quiet grinding of daily life under occupation, become the foundation of resistance or of resignation. And what of the soldiers themselves? Young men from Saxony or Prussia, marching through boulevards they had only read about in books. For them, Paris is a prize, a place of wonder. Some write home describing the beauty of its cathedrals, the elegance of its women, the strange mixture of awe and unease they feel as conquerors. Others find only discomfort, sensing hostility in every stare, every silence from the people around them. Victory brings not only glory but the constant tension of holding a city that does not welcome them. At night, the silence of Paris deepens. Gas lamps flicker, shadows stretch long across the cobbles, and the once bustling cafes glow faintly behind drawn curtains. The German officers dine in grand hotels, their laughter carrying faintly across the courtyards. Yet beneath the merriment lies the gnawing knowledge that victory is never final, that silence can conceal defiance. Somewhere in the alleys, whispers pass from mouth to mouth, scraps of paper are hidden, plans for sabotage quietly sown. The silence of the storm's aftermath is not peace. It is the pause before the next act of history. And so we are left to wonder, would this occupation, sudden and complete, have brought about reconciliation or rebellion? Would the French people, exhausted by shock, have resigned themselves to German rule, allowing a new order to settle across the continent? Or would they have nurtured the bitterness of defeat, ensuring that even if peace were signed, it would be peace only in name, a quiet that trembles with the promise of another storm? The image that lingers is this: the Seine at dusk, its waters flowing silently beneath bridges, now watched by German guards. The towers of Notre Dame glow faintly in the fading light, bells silent, the air still. The city breathes, but it breathes differently, cautiously. It is a silence rich with meaning and heavy with questions. And in the distance, across the Channel, the same silence waits in the cabinet rooms of London, where decisions have yet to be made. Cigarette smoke curls upward, a clock ticks on the mantel, and the men around the table stare at maps that no longer reflect reality. It is here, in this silence, that the fate of Europe teeters, uncertain, unresolved. The cabinet room in London remains shrouded in smoke. The silence that settled over Paris has crossed the channel and seeped into these walls, where voices rise and fall like uncertain tides. The men gathered around the polished oak table are not merely politicians, they are guardians of empire, weighing the survival of their nation against the shifting balance of Europe. On the maps spread before them, heavy lines cut across Belgium and France, their meaning as stark as the ink that forms them. German armies sit astride the continent, and the French capital lies under occupation. The dilemma is not one of conscience alone, but of calculation. Britain's empire stretches across the seas, from India's vast fields to the sunlit coasts of Africa, from the Pacific Isles to the cities of Canada and Australia. The empire's strength lies in its navy, in the ships that patrol every ocean, in the trade routes that bind together lands and peoples. But what value does naval mastery hold when the continent itself bends beneath a single power? The German fleet may remain contained, yet the German army stands unmatched, victorious on land, commanding ports and railways that threaten the very balance Britain has guarded for centuries. In this alternate world, imagine the debate. One voice, heavy with caution, insists that Britain cannot stand alone. France has fallen, Russia is uncertain, and without allies, Britain risks ruin. Better to sue for peace, to protect the empire overseas, to concede the continent, rather than lose all. Yet another voice, stern and unyielding, argues that capitulation is unthinkable. Britain has fought for centuries to prevent one power from dominating Europe, from Philip II to Louis XIV, from Napoleon to the Kaiser. To yield now would be to abandon that mission, to invite Germany's shadow across the world. The arguments are fierce, echoing through the chamber like waves against cliffs. Each man knows that their decision will shape not only their generation, but those yet unborn, and yet hesitation remains, for neither path is clear. The silence that filled Paris now fills London, a silence of waiting, of uncertainty, of a world caught in the balance. Step outside this room and into the streets of London, where ordinary citizens read newspapers in the glow of gas lamps. Headlines scream of the fall of Paris, of German triumph. Some call for resistance, their voices fiery in the pubs along Whitechapel, their fists striking tables with conviction. Others murmur of caution, fearful that Britain could be dragged into a conflict already lost. The people, like their leaders, are divided. And across the sea, in Berlin, ears strain to catch every whisper from London. The German High Command knows that Britain's choice will decide the shape of the future. If Britain sues for peace, then victory is complete, the empire unchallenged. If Britain resists, the war will shift to the seas, to blockades and colonies, to a long duel across oceans. The silence of London is, for Berlin, a silence of suspense. Let us imagine the consequences of each choice. If Britain were to seek peace, the terms would be harsh, but not impossible. Germany, triumphant yet wary of overreach, might allow Britain to keep its empire overseas in exchange for recognition of German dominance in Europe. The Channel would remain Britain's moat, but it would guard only an island kingdom, no longer the arbiter of continental balance. The Royal Navy would still command the seas, yet its influence would be weakened by the knowledge that Britain had yielded. Perhaps a cold peace would settle, one that preserved empire in name but diminished it in spirit. But if Britain chose defiance, then the story changes. The Royal Navy would impose a blockade, seeking to starve Germany of food and resources. Germany, in turn, would strike at British trade, perhaps with U-boats unleashed earlier, perhaps with new strategies devised in desperation. The war would no longer be decided on the fields of France, but on the waves of the Atlantic, in the ports of Africa, in the straits of Asia. The conflict would stretch outward, spilling across the globe, turning colonies into battlegrounds, turning neutral nations into reluctant participants. The question, then, is not simply what Britain should do, but what it could endure. Could the island nation, even with its mighty navy, withstand the weight of a triumphant continent at its doorstep? Could it preserve its empire while Europe burned? Or would defiance only hasten exhaustion, leaving Britain isolated, weakened, and vulnerable to the very collapse it sought to avoid? We must also consider the human element, the emotions of pride and fear that shape decisions as much as strategy. Britain's leaders, heirs to centuries of imperial tradition, may have found surrender unbearable, yet they were also practical men, attuned to the limits of their power. In this alternate history, their hearts and minds are torn between duty and survival, between legacy and pragmatism. The silence of their hesitation is filled with ghosts. The ghost of Trafalgar, the ghost of Waterloo, the ghost of empire itself whispering in their ears. And what of the wider empire? Imagine the reactions in India, in Australia, in Canada. The colonies read of the fall of Paris and wonder whether Britain's shield is strong enough to protect them. Some may feel emboldened, ready to rally to the mother country's cause, to prove their loyalty in a time of crisis. Others may sense weakness, questioning whether Britain's promise of protection is still credible. The empire is not merely a possession, but a living network of expectations and obligations, and the fall of Paris reverberates through it like a shockwave. Picture, then, the Thames at twilight. The river flows past the Houses of Parliament, its waters glistening with the fading light. The bells of Big Ben toll softly, marking the hour. Inside the cabinet room, the debate continues, voices rising, falling, overlapping. Outside, the city hums with uncertainty, its people carrying on with their lives, yet always glancing at the headlines, at the maps, at the horizon where the future lies hidden. This is the British dilemma: to yield or to resist, to preserve the empire or to defend the balance of Europe. There is no easy answer, no certainty. The silence that began in Paris now hangs over London, pressing down on leaders and citizens alike. It is the silence before a decision that will shape the century, the silence of a world that waits at a crossroads. And across the seas, the waves of the North Sea beat endlessly against the shores of Britain, their rhythm steady, eternal, indifferent. The waters whisper, as they always have, carrying with them the secrets of empires past. Do they murmur of defiance, urging Britain to stand firm? Or do they whisper of caution, warning of storms to come? The channel lies between Britain and the continent, a narrow strip of water, but in this moment it feels like an ocean of uncertainty. As the voices fade in London's cabinet room, as the tide rolls in along the shores, the question remains unresolved. The silence lingers, heavy and unbroken, and with that silence comes the possibility of another vision, another path not in Britain, but in the far reaches of empire where fortunes are made and futures contested. For while Europe trembles, Africa and Asia stir, waiting to see which banner will rise above their horizons. From the rolling tide of the North Sea and the hushed debates in London, our gaze drifts southward, carried by the very waves that whisper of empire. Across oceans and continents, the consequences of German triumph in Europe spread outward like ripples from a stone cast into still water. For if the Kaiserreich held Paris and bent the continent to its will, the next arena of struggle would not be in Europe's capitals, but in the vast territories beyond the colonies, the lands where resources gleamed and ambitions grew beneath alien suns. In this alternate world, picture the harbors of Hamburg and Bremen, where ships sit heavy with coal and iron, their funnels already belching smoke. German merchants and officers stand on the docks, their eyes turn toward Africa and Asia, where the empire's colonial possessions await. In our reality, Germany's colonies were modest, compared to Britain's or France's, scattered and difficult to defend. Yet under the mantle of continental triumph, those distant holdings take on new meaning. Victory in Europe would give Germany the confidence, the prestige, and the resources to transform its overseas empire from fragile outposts into pillars of global power. Imagine the railways of German East Africa expanding like veins across the landscape. The rhythmic clang of steel on steel carries across savannas, where giraffes lift their heads to watch the strange machines pass. In this victorious timeline, engineers arrive in greater numbers, their blueprints ambitious, their vision unbounded. Ports are expanded, warehouses rise, and steamships come and go with regularity, carrying ivory, coffee, cotton, and minerals to the factories of the Ruhr. The colonies, once peripheral, become integral threads woven tightly into the fabric of a German world order. And in Asia, the port of Qingdao bustles with life. German merchants stroll beneath cherry blossoms, their voices mingling with the cries of dock workers hauling crates of tea and silk. The shipyards hum with industry, warships slide into the water under the imperial flag, and the presence of Germany in China grows bold. Where once Britain and Japan competed for influence, now a victorious Germany stakes its claim with the confidence of a continental master. The Pacific, that vast expanse of blue, feels the stirrings of a new rival, its trade routes shifting beneath the weight of Berlin's ambitions. But let us not imagine this triumph as uncontested. Colonies are not mere prizes, they are living lands, full of people whose fates are bound up in the designs of empires. The African tribes who watch the railways rise may see opportunity, trade, protection, new tools, or they may see only exploitation, the tightening grip of a power that seeks to reshape their world for its own gain. In Asia, too, Germany's expansion would unsettle the delicate balance of interests. Japan, eager and ambitious, would not welcome a German-dominated Pacific. Britain, even if weakened in Europe, would look anxiously toward India, fearing that Berlin's influence might stretch into the jewel of its crown. The image grows vivid, a map of the world unfurled in a Berlin study, the Kaiser and his advisors tracing lines with eager fingers, Africa shaded in deeper colors, Asia marked with new ports, trade routes redrawn to flow toward Germany. The globe spins slowly beneath their hands, and they see not limitations, but possibilities. A world in which Berlin rivals London, not only in Europe, but in every corner of the globe. And yet, with each expansion comes risk. Overreach has broken many empires before, and triumph can breed impatience. Would Germany, fresh from victory in Europe, stretch itself too thin in its rush to dominate overseas? Would the hunger for colonies lead to friction not only with Britain, but with rising powers like the United States, whose eyes already watch the Pacific with interest? These questions float like storm clouds on the horizon, their edges glowing with uncertainty. For now, let us wander through the streets of Berlin in this imagined triumphant age. Shops display exotic goods from Africa ivory, carved into delicate figurines, fabrics dyed with colors unfamiliar to European eyes, spices whose scent lingers in the cool evening air. Citizens speak with pride of their empire, of how Germany now commands respect not only in Europe, but across oceans. Newspapers print photographs of soldiers in pith helmets, of governors standing proudly beside railways and schools, of ships christened with champagne before setting sail to distant harbors. The mood is one of confidence, of destiny fulfilled, and yet, behind the pride, whispers of unease creep in. Some wonder at the cost at the lives lost in distant jungles, at the resistance that smolders beneath the surface of conquest. Others question whether the pursuit of colonies distracts from the heart of Europe itself, whether the true prize lies not overseas, but in consolidating the continent already under German sway. The empire is triumphant, yes, but triumph can be as fragile as glass. Still, the image is powerful, the sun rising not over London's empire but over Berlin's. From Africa's deserts to Asia's ports, from the Pacific Islands to the trade routes of the Indian Ocean, the shadow of the Kaiserreich stretches long. Children in Berlin classrooms trace maps with eager fingers, their teachers declaring that Germany has taken its rightful place in the world. The dream of global power, once distant, now feels close enough to touch. As night falls on this vision, picture the harbors again. In Hamburg, ships slide silently into the water, their hulls filled with goods, their flags catching the wind. In Dar es Salaam, the tropical air hums with insects as lanterns glow in the windows of new German offices. In Qingdao, the waves lap against docks where sailors stand watch, their eyes scanning the horizon. The empire is awake, alive, triumphant. But as with all victories, questions remain. Will this new order bring stability, a Pax Germanica stretching across continents? Or will it sow new rivalries, ignite new conflicts, awaken forces that no empire can truly control? The sound that lingers is not only the clatter of trains and the hum of shipyards, but the faint, restless murmur of the peoples whose lands have been drawn into this triumph. Their voices are quiet now, yet they carry the potential of storms to come. The sun sets, and the empire's shadow lengthens across the globe. From the calm waters of the Pacific to the vast fields of Africa, the image is one of triumph, but triumph tinged with uncertainty, as though history itself holds its breath once more. And as Berlin gazes outward, its eyes fixed on distant horizons, another vision begins to stir closer to home, across the boundless plains of the East, where Russia waits like a slumbering giant. From the glow of lanterns in the ports of Africa and the quiet hum of factories along the Pacific coast, our gaze shifts eastward across Europe, carried by whispers of ambition and unease. Beyond the triumphant streets of Berlin and the silenced boulevards of Paris lies a vast expanse that stretches endlessly into the horizon. Russia, immense, enigmatic, and restless. In this alternate world where the German Empire has triumphed swiftly in the West, attention inevitably turns to the East, where the shadow of the Tsar still looms like a distant storm. Imagine the view from a train window as it rattles across Poland, now firmly within Germany's grasp. Fields of wheat ripple like seas beneath the wind, villages of wooden huts pass by, their chimneys breathing faint smoke into the sky. Beyond these plains lies the frontier of the Russian Empire, a land both formidable and fragile. Its armies, vast but unwieldy, have already stumbled in the opening months of war. In our reality, they suffered defeat at Tannenberg, a catastrophe that revealed the empire's weaknesses. In this imagined timeline, with France subdued and Britain hesitant, Germany's generals see the East as a theater not of defense, but of opportunity. Picture the German high command gathered in a map-filled chamber in Berlin. Candles flicker on long tables, illuminating the stern faces of officers who trace their fingers across rivers and railway lines. The Western victory has freed their hands, and now they contemplate how to reshape the East. Should they push deep into Russian territory, forcing the Tsar to sue for peace? Should they carve new borders, creating buffer states loyal to Berlin? Or should they pursue a subtler domination, economic and political, binding Russia into a web it cannot escape? The possibilities multiply, each as tantalizing as it is perilous. On the ground, the scene would be one of grim determination. German columns march through forests, where the air smells of pine and damp earth. Their boots leave deep impressions in the mud. Their rifles glint faintly in the pale light. Villagers peer from behind fences, some fearful, some indifferent, some quietly hopeful that new rulers might bring stability where the Tsar's officials had only brought neglect. The vastness of the land seems to swallow the sound of marching feet, yet the soldiers press on, guided by iron timetables and the belief that destiny itself marches with them. Yet Russia is no ordinary foe. Its sheer size defies easy conquest. Its winters turn invaders into ghosts. Its people endure hardships with a resilience born of centuries. Even as Germany imagines victory, the question lingers: can Russia ever truly be subdued? The defeat of its armies might topple the Tsar sooner than in our reality, where revolution erupted after years of suffering. Perhaps in this alternate timeline, the strains of war, compounded by swift defeats, bring unrest earlier, forcing Nicholas II to abdicate not in 1917, but years sooner. A provisional government, fragile and uncertain, might emerge under German oversight, reshaping the East without the fires of Bolshevism ever being lit. But another vision is possible. Suppose Germany's triumph emboldens it to overreach, to march deeper into the Russian heartland. The further they go, the more the vastness becomes an enemy. Railways stretch thin, supplies falter, winter closes in with icy jaws, villages burn, partisans stir, and the land itself resists. In such a scenario, victory could become a quagmire, draining Germany's strength even as it revels in triumph elsewhere. The silence of Paris, the hesitation of London, the expansion in Africa, these gains could be undone by the endless hunger of Russia's steppes. Let us pause to consider the human element once more. Picture a Russian soldier, poorly equipped, his boots worn thin, his rifle heavy in his hands. He stands in a trench, carved hastily into frozen soil, staring across a no-man's land where German banners flutter. His officers are uncertain, his rations meager, yet he fights on because he has little choice. In our reality, men like him endured years of slaughter before revolution offered a grim alternative. In this imagined history, perhaps his endurance is cut short, his empire collapsing beneath the weight of early defeat. Would he greet the German conquerors as liberators, or would he curse them with his last breath? Meanwhile, in the salons of St. Petersburg, the nobility whisper anxiously. News of defeat spreads quickly, and faith in the Tsar wanes. Rasputin's shadow lingers, but even his mysticism cannot halt the march of history. Some nobles may look westward, imagining a compromise with Berlin to preserve their estates and privileges. Others cling desperately to the Romanov dynasty, fearing the chaos that change might bring. The city, poised on the edge of upheaval, becomes a mirror of uncertainty. Back in Berlin, the Kaiser dreams of a new order in the East. He imagines puppet states rising where once Russian provinces stood, Poland, Lithuania, Ukraine, all bound by treaties, their economies tied to Germany, their armies dependent on German protection. The vision is one of Mitteleuropa extended, a cordon of satellite nations forming a shield and a resource base. Trains from Ukraine would carry grain to the heart of Germany, ensuring that no blockade could starve the empire. Coal from the Donbass, oil from the Caucasus, all could flow westward, feeding industry and war machines alike, and yet, as with every triumph, doubt remains. Would these new states truly accept German dominance, or would they resist quietly, waiting for a chance to break free? Would Russia itself accept a diminished role, or would it bide its time, rebuilding and plotting revenge? History is not static. Victories contain the seeds of future conflicts. The silence that once filled Paris now stretches across the Russian plains, a silence heavy with possibility, trembling with unresolved futures. Let us imagine, for a moment, a different possibility altogether. Suppose Germany, rather than seeking outright conquest, chooses diplomacy. With France humbled and Britain hesitant, perhaps Berlin extends a hand to St. Petersburg, offering peace in exchange for concessions. A defeated Russia might cede Poland, Lithuania, perhaps Ukraine, while retaining its core territories. Such a peace would preserve the empire, but in weakened form, its pride wounded, its influence curtailed. This path avoids the quagmire of endless invasion, yet leaves the question of Russia's future unsettled. Would such a peace prevent revolution, or merely delay it? Would a weakened Tsar hold his throne, or would discontent still simmer until it boiled over? The images intertwine. German soldiers marching through forests, Russian nobles whispering in salons, peasants toiling in fields under new masters, Berlin planners redrawing maps by candlelight. Each possibility flows into the next. uncertain, unresolved, like rivers merging in the vastness of the steppe. As night falls across Russia, the land lies silent beneath the stars. The snow reflects pale light, stretching endlessly in every direction. Somewhere, a wolf howls, its cry echoing through forests where soldiers huddle around fires. The silence is not peace, but a pause, a waiting. Germany's shadow stretches eastward, but Russia remains, vast and inscrutable, its fate a mystery even to those who dream of conquest. And as Berlin contemplates its eastern horizon, another vision begins to take shape closer to home. The Kaiser, crowned in glory, stands before cheering crowds, his empire triumphant not only abroad, but within. For with victory comes not only power, but stability, a chance to preserve the monarchy at its golden height. The Eastern question lingers, but in Berlin, the moment feels like destiny fulfilled. From the frozen plains of Russia, where soldiers huddle beneath endless skies and victories remain uncertain, our vision drifts westward again to Berlin, where the mood is very different. Here, in this imagined timeline of flawless triumph, the Kaiser stands at the height of his power. The defeats of France and the hesitation of Britain have elevated him from a monarch often mocked for his bluster to the ruler of a continent that bows before his will. In the corridors of the palace, chandeliers blaze, mirrors reflect uniforms heavy with medals, and the air vibrates with speeches of destiny. Picture Wilhelm II walking through the marble halls of his palace, his spiked helmet gleaming, his stride purposeful. In our real history, his confidence so often concealed insecurity, his triumphs followed by missteps, his empire shaken by defeat. But here, in this golden hour, his confidence feels justified. He looks upon a Europe subdued, and sees not fragility, but permanence. The monarchy, once mocked by socialists and threatened by dissent, now appears unshakable. The people cheer him as the man who guided Germany to greatness, and his dynasty glows in reflected light. The streets outside mirror this triumph. Unter den Linden is crowded with citizens waving flags, their voices raised in songs of unity. Newspapers overflow with praise, proclaiming the dawn of a German century. Children play at being soldiers, wooden rifles in hand, their games no longer tinged with anxiety but with pride. Factories hum with industry, their smoke rising like banners to the heavens. It is a vision of stability, of a monarchy preserved not through compromise but through victory. Yet within this golden light, shadows linger. For what does such triumph mean for the currents of discontent that once threatened the empire from within? In our world, the hardships of war open the door to revolution, to mutinies, to the fall of monarchy. Here, with victory secured, that door appears closed. The Social Democratic Party, once gaining strength, finds itself disarmed by success. Their demands for reform ring hollow when the empire stands proud, its soldiers victorious, its industries thriving. The memory of failure is gone, replaced by the intoxication of triumph. Revolution fades, its embers smothered beneath parades and prosperity. But triumph cannot erase questions, it can only postpone them. Imagine workers in the Ruhr, their hands blackened with coal dust, their backs bent from long hours. They cheer the Kaiser in public, but in private, they still whisper of fairness, of better wages, of a voice in governance. Victory has silenced the urgency of their demands, yet not erased them. Beneath the glittering surface, the pressures of modernization and inequality remain, waiting for cracks to appear. And what of the Kaiser himself? History remembers Wilhelm as a man of contradictions, boastful yet insecure, visionary yet reckless. In this alternate reality, his victory strengthens his belief in divine favor, his conviction that he is chosen to guide not only Germany but Europe. He imagines himself as a new Charlemagne, a monarch whose reign secures centuries of stability. But such confidence can breed blindness. Surrounded by courtiers who echo his triumph, he may fail to see the challenges that linger beyond the horizon. His golden hour, though radiant, carries within it the seeds of complacency. Consider also the family, the dynasty that now basks in reflected light. The Kaiserin smiles beside him, her dignity restored by triumph. Their children, heirs to a secure throne, walk through gardens where fountains sparkle, where laughter carries in the warm air. The fear of abdication, of exile, of dynastic collapse that haunted other monarchies seems banished here. Instead, the Hohenzollerns appear destined to reign unchallenged, their lineage secure, their palaces filled with music and celebration. The image is idyllic, almost dreamlike, yet it begs the question, would such stability have allowed them to adapt, or would it have trapped them in the golden cage of tradition? Beyond the palace walls, the golden hour spreads across German society. Universities thrive, scientists push boundaries, artists imagine new worlds. In our reality, war and defeat disrupted this flowering, scattering minds and energies across exiles and tragedies. But in this world of victory, such brilliance is nurtured, encouraged by a state proud of its achievements. Imagine laboratories glowing with electric light, researchers experimenting with chemistry and physics, engineers designing machines that promise to transform life itself. The hum of discovery joins the hum of industry, the two blending into a symphony of progress. Yet progress can serve many masters. Would such innovations have been used to improve lives, or to strengthen an empire already hungry for dominance? A victorious Germany might invest more deeply in aviation, in automobiles, in communication. Zeppelins could drift majestically across skies, not as curiosities, but as everyday marvels. Telephones and radios could spread faster, knitting together the empire's distant corners. But alongside these wonders lurks another possibility, that such technology would serve armies and navies preparing not for peace, but for the next great struggle. In the Kaiser's golden hour, progress shines brightly, but its direction remains uncertain. Picture the city of Berlin on a summer evening in this imagined timeline. The lamps glow softly along the avenues, carriages roll past, cafes spill light and conversation onto the streets. Musicians play in open squares, their notes mingling with the laughter of crowds. The city hums with energy, with pride, with the sense that history itself has turned in Germany's favor. For ordinary citizens, life feels secure, promising. They believe their children will grow up in an age of greatness, spared the ruin that, in our reality, would scar a generation. And yet, beyond the laughter and music, faint whispers remain. Some fear the intoxication of triumph, sensing that pride can lead nations astray. Others wonder whether stability can endure in a world that has always shifted, where victory breeds envy and rivals never rest. The golden hour feels eternal, but time is never still. The sun that glows now will one day sink, and no empire, however triumphant, can escape the turning of history's wheel. Still, for this moment, the Kaiser's empire shines. The monarchy is secure, the people united, the dynasty radiant. It is a vision of what might have been, a Germany that never faltered, a world reshaped by triumph. The image lingers like a painting, golden light spilling across canvas, every detail illuminated, every shadow softened. But even as Berlin basks in this glow, another figure rises in the distance. Across the Atlantic, the Statue of Liberty stands against the mist, her torch a reminder of another nation watching silently. The United States, distant yet restless, sees Europe transformed by German victory and must decide its own role in this altered world. Will it remain aloof, content in isolation, or will it stir, drawn inevitably into rivalry? The golden hour of the Kaiserreich cannot last untouched, for beyond the oceans America watches. From Berlin's golden glow, where the Kaiser basks in the applause of his people, our vision drifts outward across the Atlantic, across waves that glimmer faintly beneath the light of the moon. There, through the mist and salt air, the Statue of Liberty lifts her torch above the harbor of New York, silent and unblinking. Her copper face, already darkening with time, watches the ships that pass beneath, carrying goods, passengers, rumors of war, and now news of a Europe transformed by German triumph. America, distant yet attentive, cannot remain untouched by this shifting balance. Picture the streets of New York in this imagined year, where newspapers fly from the hands of newsboys, their voices ringing through the canyons of skyscrapers. Paris falls, German victory, Britain hesitates. Headlines in bold type are plastered across kiosks, their ink smudged by eager fingers. Men in hats and coats gather at corners, arguing in quick bursts, some marveling at Germany's strength, others fearing what such power might mean for the world. In cafes, in factories, in universities, the conversation spreads. Should America care? Or should it remain an observer, secure behind its oceans? The United States at this moment in history is powerful but cautious. Its people still remember the costs of distant entanglements, still value the promise of isolation. The Atlantic and Pacific feel like protective walls, guarding the nation from Europe's endless quarrels. Yet walls do not always hold, and the fall of Paris shakes confidence even here. For if Germany commands Europe, if its empire stretches across Africa and Asia, what then becomes of America's place in the world? Can it remain a quiet giant, or will it be drawn, slowly but surely, into rivalry? Imagine President Woodrow Wilson sitting at his desk, his spectacles perched low, papers spread before him. In our real history, he spoke of making the world safe for democracy, of intervening in a war that seemed to threaten global stability. But in this alternate path, where Germany has already triumphed, his questions are different. Should America confront the Kaiserreich, risking war across the seas? Or should it accept the new order, focusing inward on reform and prosperity? Each option carries weight, each carries risk, and Wilson, idealistic yet calculating, knows that the decision will echo for decades. And what of the American people? Picture a farmer in Iowa, standing in his field as the sun sets behind rows of corn. For him, Europe feels impossibly distant, its battles little more than words on a page. His concern is the soil beneath his boots, the weather that shapes his harvest, the prices that rise or fall with every rumor of war. He wonders whether German victory will disrupt trade, whether the markets he depends upon will shift. For him, the question is not ideology, but survival. Yet even here, in the quiet heartland, the distant triumph of Germany becomes a faint but insistent echo. In the cities, the echo is louder. Immigrants from Europe, Germans, Irish, Italians argue passionately in bars and meeting halls. German Americans wave flags and boast of their ancestral homeland's glory, imagining a world where their heritage now stands supreme. Others, more cautious, fear that such pride will breed suspicion, will mark them as sympathizers in a country that values unity. The melting pot boils with conflicting emotions, each community carrying its own interpretation of Germany's triumph. Meanwhile, across the Pacific coast, another anxiety stirs. Japan, ambitious and watchful, has already allied with Britain in our true history. In this alternate timeline, with Britain hesitant and Germany triumphant, the balance shifts. America, with its growing interests in the Pacific, must now consider whether a German presence in Asia, stronger, more confident, more assertive, poses a threat to its own ambitions. The Pacific, once seen as an American lake in the making, now ripples with uncertainty. Let us imagine Wall Street, its towers already symbols of ambition. Bankers and industrialists pore over reports, calculating the implications of German dominance. Some see opportunity. Trade with a victorious Germany could be profitable, a chance to supply goods to a power that commands half the world. Others see danger. A Europe closed under German economic control could shut out American markets, challenge American influence. The clatter of typewriters and the murmur of telephones blend into the hum of speculation, each voice seeking to predict how this new order will reshape commerce. And yet, through all this speculation, one truth remains. America is watching, waiting, but not yet acting. Its people are cautious, its leaders uncertain, its destiny still undecided. In the silence that follows German triumph, America hovers at the edge, unsure whether to remain aloof or to step onto the stage. But what if it chose differently? Suppose America, inspired by democratic ideals, decided to confront the Kaiserreich early to prevent a world dominated by monarchy and empire. Its factories would shift to arms production, its soldiers would train, its navy would sail across the Atlantic. A clash of titans could unfold, Germany's armies against America's industry, a struggle that would shape not only Europe, but the globe. In such a scenario, the 20th century might become a duel not between fascism and democracy, as in our real history, but between monarchy and republic, each claiming the right to define the future. Or perhaps America, secure in its isolation, would choose another path. It could turn inward, investing in roads, schools, and cities, allowing Europe to settle into its German order while the United States built its own century from within. Such a choice might delay conflict, but rivalry has a way of finding even those who seek peace. Two powers of such magnitude, Germany triumphant in Europe, America rising in the West, could not long ignore each other. The oceans would shrink with technology, the world would tighten, and eventually, their paths would meet. The image that lingers is one of a harbor at dusk. The Statue of Liberty stands tall, her torch flickering against the sky. Around her, ships move slowly, their hulls filled with goods, their decks crowded with passengers. On the piers, men in hats watch the horizon, speaking of Europe with curiosity, with pride, with fear. Some dream of opportunity, others sense danger, but all feel the weight of change. America is watching, and in that watchful silence lies the seed of its next great decision. And across the Atlantic, in Berlin's grand halls, Germany watches in return. The Kaiser knows that Europe is his, but he wonders about the faraway republic, so distant yet so full of potential. Will America remain a sleeping giant, or will it awaken, challenging his empire's supremacy? For now, the question remains unanswered, suspended in the silence between two oceans. But Europe itself has questions still. Victory has been declared, triumph secured, yet treaties must be written, borders must be drawn, alliances must be formalized. The peace that follows conquest can be as dangerous as war itself. And so, from the watchful silence of America, our story circles back to the marble halls of Europe, where diplomats gather with pens poised over parchment, ready to write the Peace of Berlin. From the still waters of New York Harbor, where liberty's torch flickers against the dusk, we return once more across the Atlantic, carried into the heart of Europe. In Berlin, the city at the center of this altered world, the streets are festooned with banners, the air alive with celebration, but inside the grand halls of diplomacy, a quieter, more delicate struggle begins. Triumph in battle has brought armies to heel in capitals under German flags, yet victory on the battlefield is not the same as peace in the world. For peace requires words, signatures, and compromises, even when dictated by conquerors. It requires parchment and pens as much as bayonets and shells. And in this imagined history, the treaties written in Berlin will shape the century as decisively as the fall of Paris. Picture the Reichstag draped in silks, its chambers echoing with the murmur of voices in many tongues. Diplomats from across Europe arrive in dark suits, their expressions a careful blend of humility and calculation. French representatives, pale and drawn, carry the bitterness of humiliation in their stiff postures. Russian envoys, uncertain of their position, whisper nervously among themselves, their empire shaken by defeats in Poland and Galicia. Even emissaries from Britain arrive, not with defiance, but with guarded caution, their words chosen with the precision of men who know the cost of isolation. At the head of it all stands Germany, proud and unyielding, its generals and ministers ready to carve a new order into history. The Kaiser himself appears at intervals, his figure theatrical beneath chandeliers, his voice rich with the certainty of a man convinced that destiny bends toward him. He speaks of a Europe united under stability, of a new century of order, of peace born not from compromise, but from strength. His words echo through the halls, and though many bristle inwardly, none dare openly oppose him. For behind his rhetoric stand the victories of his armies, the occupied capitals, the maps redrawn by force. And so the Peace of Berlin begins to take shape. France, humiliated and broken, faces the harshest terms. Alsace-Lorraine, already lost in 1871, remains firmly in German hands, but now additional territories shift eastward, drawing France's borders inward like a wound. Reparations are demanded, heavy sums to be paid not over years, but decades, their weight pressing down on the French economy like a millstone. German troops linger on French soil, a constant reminder of submission. Yet even here, questions remain. How much humiliation can France endure before resentment festers into rebellion? Is peace built on such terms truly peace, or merely silence before the next storm? Britain's role in this treaty is more ambiguous. In this imagined path, the cabinet has hesitated, unwilling to plunge the empire into a war already decided, and so Britain bargains cautiously. Germany offers recognition of British dominance at sea, a promise not to challenge the Royal Navy directly in exchange for acceptance of German supremacy on land. The colonies, once the points of friction, are divided in new ways. Germany gains expanded territories in Africa, its holdings in East and Southwest Africa now stretching broader, linked by rail and port, while Britain retains its older, vaster possessions. The result is an uneasy balance, a division of spheres that seems stable on parchment, yet trembles beneath the surface with the weight of rivalry. Russia's delegation, too, faces humiliation, though not as severe as France's. Defeated and disorganized, the Tsar's government accepts a peace that strips away Poland and the Baltic provinces, placing them under German influence. Ukraine, rich in grain and resources, becomes the centerpiece of German demands. Its fields promise to feed the empire for generations. Russia, too vast to be wholly broken, retains its core, but its pride lies in ruins. Within its borders, unrest stirs, revolution whispered more loudly in factories and barracks. The Peace of Berlin may halt armies, but it cannot halt ideas, and the seeds of upheaval remain. Across the table, smaller nations wait anxiously for their fate. Belgium, crushed beneath the weight of the Schlieffen advance, is forced into the German orbit, its neutrality gone, its ports used to expand German reach into the Channel. The Balkans, long a tinderbox of rivalries, are rearranged under German oversight, Austria-Hungary preserved and strengthened as Berlin's loyal partner. Italy, wavering in its loyalties, is courted with promises of territory, its ambitions tied to the fate of the Central Powers. The map of Europe, once so fragile, is now redrawn with heavy lines that favor Berlin in every corner. And yet, for all its grandeur, the Peace of Berlin is not without fragility. The diplomats sign documents, the ink flows, the wax seals harden, but beneath the marble floors the ground is never truly still. France nurses its humiliation, Russia its wounds, Britain its doubts. The smaller nations chafe under German oversight, their sovereignty diminished, their voices muted. The peace may silence the guns, but silence is not the same as harmony. The halls of Berlin ring with the triumph of signatures, but also with the faint, unspoken knowledge that treaties cannot bind resentment forever. Let us pause to imagine the atmosphere in Berlin during these days. Outside the palaces where treaties are signed, crowds gather in jubilation. The people wave flags, sing songs, throw flowers before the carriages of diplomats. They see only triumph, the proof that their sacrifices have borne fruit, that their empire has secured its place in the Sunday. Newspapers print triumphalist headlines, artists sketch visions of a glorious German century, children recite patriotic verses in schools. The city glows with pride, its streets filled with parades, its skies with fireworks. To the ordinary Berliner, peace feels real, solid, a foundation upon which to build prosperity. Inside, however, the mood is more complex. Some diplomats, even among the victors, wonder whether the terms are too harsh, whether victory has blinded them to the need for balance. Others, intoxicated by triumph, dismiss such doubts, insisting that Germany's strength is eternal, that its enemies are broken forever. The tension between caution and arrogance hums beneath every conversation, like a string pulled taut, ready to snap. Consider the metaphor of sound. The Peace of Berlin is not a symphony, harmonious and resolved, but a drumbeat loud, insistent, commanding, yet monotonous, its rhythm hiding dissonance beneath its power. It resounds across Europe, echoing in capitals and colonies alike, yet its resonance carries both triumph and foreboding. For every treaty signed, there is a heart that resents, a voice that whispers of revenge, a silence that hides defiance. As the last signatures are made, as the documents are stored in gilded cabinets, the world steps into a new order. Europe now lies under the shadow of Berlin, its borders redrawn, its balance shattered, its peace dictated by the victors. For Germany, this is the culmination of destiny, the realization of dreams long nurtured. For the rest, it is a bitter pill, swallowed under duress, its taste lingering. Night falls on Berlin, the city glowing with lamps and celebrations, the treaties resting on desks as if they were unshakable. Outside, the crowd still sings, the music floats upward, and the air is filled with the scent of summer and victory. Yet beyond the city, across fields and forests, in villages and towns, in factories and barracks, other sounds stir, murmurs of discontent, whispers of resistance, sighs of exhaustion. The Peace of Berlin has ended one storm, but it may have sown the seeds of others, and as the diplomats depart, as carriages roll through the gates, another vision takes shape. Peace brings not only treaties but prosperity, not only borders but industries. In the Ruhr, in Saxony, in Bavaria, factories hum with renewed vigor, their furnaces glowing like rivers of fire. Germany, freed from fear of blockade or defeat, now turns inward to harness its industry, to build a future of steel, electricity, and invention. From the quiet of treaties, we move to the clamor of machines, to the dream of industry that defines the next stage of this alternate world. From the marble silence of treaties and the echo of diplomats' pens in Berlin's gilded halls, the scene shifts to a different rhythm, the deep, unbroken clamor of machines. Peace has been signed, borders redrawn, but history does not rest in ink alone. It moves in furnaces, in hammers striking steel, in the endless turning of gears. And so, in this alternate world where Germany has triumphed completely, the next chapter is not one of armies or diplomats, but of factories and industry. Imagine the Ruhr Valley at dawn. The sky is still gray with morning mist, but already chimneys spit smoke into the air. The streets tremble with the weight of freight trains, their cars groaning with iron ore, coal, and steel. Sparks fly from foundries, where molten metal pours like rivers of fire, dazzling orange against the dim sky. The air smells of smoke and hot iron, the heartbeat of an empire that now turns from war to prosperity. In our reality, Germany's industry strained under blockade, its people hungry, its factories starved of resources. But here, with victory secured, resources flow freely from Ukraine's grain to Africa's minerals. From trade routes opened by diplomacy and conquest, industry is not strangled, it is unleashed. The transformation is swift. Engineers, their hands inked with blueprints, walk briskly through workshops, their minds racing with possibility. New machines hum in laboratories, electric motors thrum with promise, and chemicals bubble in glass tubes under the eyes of researchers who dream of medicines, dyes, and fuels. German universities, already among the world's finest, are no longer disrupted by war but empowered by triumph. Students fill lecture halls where professors speak not of shortages but of opportunities. In Göttingen, physicists sketch equations that point toward discoveries decades ahead of their time. In Munich, chemists refine processes that will revolutionize medicine and agriculture. Picture the hum of the Siemens factories in Berlin, where dynamos spin and wires coil, bringing light to towns and cities. Electric lamps glow in homes where candles once flickered, and tramcars roll smoothly through cobbled streets, carrying workers to jobs in ever-expanding industries. The sound is not one of silence, but of progress, steady, relentless, intoxicating. For a nation victorious, industry is not just prosperity, it is proof of destiny, a tangible reminder that Germany's triumph on the battlefield can be matched by triumph in invention. And yet, the question arises, toward what end will this industry turn? Will it serve peace, building bridges, hospitals, and schools? Or will it serve war, feeding arsenals, constructing fleets, and designing weapons that reach further than ever before? In this imagined history, both paths remain open. Germany, proud and confident, might pursue a golden age of innovation, shaping a future of comfort and modernity. Or it might turn its factories towards steel and gunpowder, preparing for conflicts that its leaders, intoxicated by victory, cannot resist. Let us pause to envision the lives of ordinary people in this world. Picture a young worker in Essen, his hands rough from handling steel, his lungs filled with the taste of smoke. He earns better wages now, his family eats more regularly, his children attend schools that are better funded by a prosperous state. He walks home at night through streets lit by electric lamps, proud of his role in an empire that seems unshakable. Yet even he wonders whether this prosperity is permanent or whether it is only the calm before storms yet unseen. Consider, too, the middle class of Berlin, the shopkeepers, the clerks, the teachers. They thrive in this moment, their businesses bustling, their homes filled with goods once rare, gramophones playing music, photographs capturing family portraits, books printed cheaply and widely distributed. Cafes hum with conversations, not of shortages, but of ideas, of philosophy, of the promise of science. For them, Germany's victory has delivered not only security, but a sense that they live at the very center of the modern world, a people chosen by history to lead. But triumph breeds envy. Other nations watch as Germany's industry expands, as trains race across Europe bearing goods stamped with the eagle. France, humiliated and impoverished, sees its markets flooded with German products, its pride diminished not only in politics but in commerce. Britain, though still dominant at sea, feels its economic supremacy slipping, the shadow of German goods stretching into colonies once firmly in its grasp. Russia, wounded and weakened, struggles to rebuild even as German investors circle like hawks, offering loans that tighten their grip. The hum of German industry is not heard in isolation. It is heard as a challenge by every rival, its rhythm unsettling as much as it inspires. And what of the colonies, those distant lands whose resources fuel this prosperity? In Africa, the expansion of railways carries not only goods, but soldiers, administrators, missionaries. Villages find themselves bound to a system that serves Berlin's markets, their labor extracted, their crops redirected. Some welcome the stability of German order, others resent the weight of foreign rule. In Asia, too, the presence of German factories and merchants grows, their influence pressing against Japan's ambitions, stirring unease in Britain's India. The dream of industry, glowing so brightly in Berlin, casts long shadows across the world. Within Germany itself, the prosperity reshapes society. The Social Democrats, long a voice for reform, find their arguments blunted by abundance. Workers who once clamored for revolution are quieter now, their bellies full, their wages steady. Yet beneath the surface, discontent still stirs. For prosperity is never evenly distributed. In the tenements of Berlin, families still struggle. Children still labor in factories. Women still fight for recognition. Victory has bought time, but not perfection. And even in triumph, the seeds of future unrest remain. The metaphor that best captures this moment is fire. In the furnaces of the Ruhr, flames roar, melting iron into steel, shaping the tools and machines of the future. Fire warms, it illuminates, it creates but it also consumes, it destroys, it spreads beyond control if not guided carefully. Germany, in this golden industrial age, holds fire in its hands. Whether it uses it to light the world or to burn it remains unresolved. As evening falls, imagine the skyline of Berlin glowing with factory lights, smoke drifting lazily into the night sky. The streets are alive with carriages and trams, the cafes filled with laughter, the parks with children at play. In the distance, the faint whistle of a train cuts through the air, carrying goods from the east, from the colonies, from every corner of a world that now feeds Berlin's ambition. The city hums with confidence, with destiny, with the intoxicating rhythm of industry. But even as the furnaces roar and the gears turn, the empire must face another question, one not of machines or trade, but of the people far away whose labor sustains this triumph. In Africa, in Asia, in islands scattered across the seas, voices are rising, faint but insistent. The restless colonies, bound now tighter to Germany's dream of industry, begin to stir, their silence no longer certain. The hum of factories may dominate Berlin, but the drums of distant lands begin to beat, quietly at first, then louder. From the glowing furnaces of the Ruhr, from the endless hum of machines forging steel and prosperity, our vision drifts outward again, far beyond Berlin's factories and bustling avenues. The rhythm of industry is matched now by another sound, faint but insistent. The low, steady beat of drums across Africa, the whisper of winds through palms in the Pacific, the murmurs of voices in markets from Tanganyika to Samoa. For Germany's triumph in Europe has bound its colonies more tightly into its destiny, and in this imagined world of victory, those colonies are no longer marginal outposts, but vital arteries feeding the empire's heart. Yet, arteries carry not only lifeblood, they also carry tension, and in distant lands, tension begins to stir. Picture German East Africa, its savannas stretching toward the horizon beneath a sun that blazes like a furnace. Along new railways, trains rattle past villages, their whistles shrill, their cargo holds filled with ivory, cotton, coffee, and minerals destined for Europe's markets. German overseers stand on platforms, their uniforms crisp in the heat, their notebooks recording shipments with precision. To Berlin, these lands are triumphs of empire, proof that victory at home has secured dominance abroad. To the colonized peoples, however, the trains are symbols of something else, a system that drains their labor and resources, binding them to a distant power whose language and laws are not their own. The metaphor of drums captures this tension. In villages at night, when the stars scatter across the sky and fires crackle, the sound of drums carries across the grasslands. It is music, yes, but also message signals passed from place to place, voices of resistance murmuring beneath the surface. For though Germany imagines its empire as stable, the people who live beneath its rule feel its weight differently. Some adapt, trading, working, finding ways to prosper within the system. Others seethe, remembering old freedoms, whispering of rebellion. Let us imagine a young man in Tanganyika, his back bent from carrying sacks of grain to a rail depot. His wages are meager, his overseer stern, his labor unending. At night, he sits by the fire, listening to elders speak of the world, before colonization, before foreign flags. His heart is divided. He longs for freedom, but knows the German soldiers are strong, their rifles deadly, their presence unrelenting. Yet in his heart grows a seed of defiance, a conviction that no empire, however triumphant, is eternal. Move now to Southwest Africa, where deserts stretch beneath burning skies, their silence broken only by the howl of wind. Here the memory of brutality lingers, for in our true history the Herero and Nama suffered horrors under German rule. In this alternate world of German victory, would such brutality have been restrained by confidence or intensified by arrogance? Perhaps Berlin, secure in triumph, might pursue a softer paternalism, investing in schools and railways, believing itself benevolent, or perhaps, intoxicated by power, it would press harder, seeking to crush dissent with ruthless force. In either vision, the colonies are restless, their silence never absolute, their future always uncertain. And in the Pacific, the islands under German rule hum with another kind of unease. The coconut palms sway, the surf crashes against reefs, but beneath the idyllic surface lies tension. German merchants expand their reach, missionaries preach in distant villages, naval bases hum with activity. For the people of these islands, change is rapid, unsettling, often unwelcome. They trade copra and shells, but they also feel their autonomy slipping away. And always, on the horizon, another power watches Japan, eager to expand, its ambitions sharpening as Germany's empire grows. The Pacific, once a scattering of quiet isles, becomes a chessboard for empires, each move echoing across oceans. Let us pause to consider the empire's perspective. In Berlin, colonial administrators gather in polished offices, their maps spread across tables, their ledgers filled with figures. They see the colonies as successes, proof of Germany's rightful place among great powers. They calculate shipments, profits, and development plans with the same precision they apply to rail timetables in Europe. For them, the restless whispers in Africa or the Pacific are distant, muffled by distance and bureaucracy. They imagine their rule as firm, their control as certain, their empire as stable. Yet history has always proven otherwise. The colonies of every empire carry within them contradictions. They are both sources of wealth and seeds of resistance. They provide glory, but also fragility. Germany, in this alternate history, is no exception. Its colonies enrich Berlin, but they also tie it to faraway lands where storms can rise suddenly. A drought in East Africa, an uprising in Southwest Africa, a clash in the Pacific, all could ripple back to the heart of Europe, unsettling the dream of industry and prosperity. Picture the empire's colonies at dusk. In Africa, the drums beat faintly, their sound carrying across plains as fires flicker in the distance. In Asia, the bustling ports quiet as fishermen mend nets, their voices low, their thoughts uneasy. In the Pacific, waves lap against shores where villagers gather, speaking softly of change, of foreigners, of futures uncertain. The empire imagines silence, but the world hums with voices, with questions, with possibilities. For perhaps in this alternate history, Germany might attempt a new model of empire, one that avoids the pitfalls of cruelty and neglect. With its triumph in Europe secure, it could afford to be generous, investing in schools, infrastructure, even limited self-governance, believing that loyalty can be purchased with opportunity. Such a vision could prolong stability, weaving colonies more tightly into the German order. Or, conversely, victory might breed arrogance, convincing Berlin that its rule is absolute, that resistance can be crushed without consequence. In that case, every drumbeat in Africa, every whisper in the Pacific would grow louder until the sound could no longer be ignored. And what of Britain, watching anxiously from afar? Even if London hesitated at the Peace of Berlin, its empire remains vast, its eyes keen. The expansion of German colonies presses against British pride, threatening its sense of global supremacy. Rivalries may shift from Europe's fields to Africa's jungles, from Europe's rivers to Asia's ports. The restless colonies are not only Germany's challenge, they are Britain's opportunity. For every whisper of dissent is a chance to undermine Berlin's empire. In this alternate world, the great game of colonies becomes sharper, more precarious, more dangerous. As night deepens, the sounds of drums in Africa blend with the hum of waves in the Pacific, a chorus of distant voices rising beneath the stars. Germany's empire is triumphant. Yet within that triumph lies fragility. Colonies are never truly silent, and empires never truly secure. The Kaiserreich, glowing with industry and victory, must now listen carefully to those faint rhythms, for they carry warnings as well as music. And as Berlin gazes outward, hearing the restless whispers of empire, another question begins to form closer to home. What of Britain itself? The island that hesitated, the empire that still commands the seas, the rival whose pride cannot be silenced forever. The restless colonies may shape Germany's reach, but across the Channel, Britain waits, its dilemma unresolved, its shadow ever present. From the distant drums of Africa and the murmurs of the Pacific, our vision drifts back across the seas, over rolling waves where gulls cry above the spray, toward the narrow stretch of water that separates two worlds. The Channel, restless and gray beneath the shifting sky, has always been more than a strip of ocean. It is a line of defense, a moat of empire, a symbol of Britain's separation from continental storms. Yet now, in this alternate world, with Paris subdued and Berlin triumphant, the Channel carries a new unease. The question that haunts every minister in Whitehall, every admiral at Portsmouth, every dockworker along the Thames, is simple yet monumental. What is Britain to do in a world remade by German victory? Picture the coast of Kent at dawn, the cliffs white against the rising Sunday. On the far horizon, the faint outline of the continent can be seen, a reminder that Britain is not as isolated as it often pretends. Fishermen mend their nets, their boats rocking gently, while behind them soldiers patrol, rifles slung across their shoulders. The fear is not of invasion, the Royal Navy still commands the seas, but of irrelevance. For if Germany controls the continent, what role remains for Britain? Can an island empire stand proud while Europe bows to Berlin? Inside the cabinet rooms of London, the atmosphere is thick with indecision. The oak table is once again crowded with papers and maps, the air clouded by smoke from pipes and cigars. Ministers argue fiercely. Some urge reconciliation, pointing to the colonies, to trade, to the navy, arguing that Britain must preserve what it has rather than risk it all in a lost cause. Better to accept German dominance on land, they say, than to throw away the empire overseas. Others, their voices sharp with conviction, declare that Britain cannot yield, that to allow one power to dominate Europe is to invite eventual ruin. Their words carry the weight of centuries of policy, the long tradition of preventing any single nation from mastering the continent. The debate is not abstract, it is personal, visceral. Each man feels the shadow of history pressing on his shoulders. They recall the Armada, the wars against Louis XIV, the long struggle with Napoleon. Time and again Britain stood as the counterbalance, the defiant island. To abandon that role now is to betray not only policy but identity. Yet they also recall the empty coffers of past wars, the lives lost, the dangers of overreach. Pride pulls in one direction, prudence in another. The silence that follows each argument is heavy, broken only by the ticking of a clock that seems to measure not minutes but destinies. And outside those rooms, the people of Britain watch and wait. In the pubs of London's East End, men gather around tables with pints in hand, debating fiercely whether Germany's rise is a threat or a distant quarrel. Some cheer the idea of peace, weary of taxes and wars. Others, their voices tinged with anger, vow that Britain must never bow to a foreign master, however distant. In Manchester, factory workers read headlines of German industrial might, wondering if their own livelihoods will be undercut. In Liverpool, dock workers load ships for distant colonies, anxious that German influence might one day close those routes. The question of Britain is not confined to ministers. It beats in the hearts of ordinary citizens, their pride and fear mingling in equal measure. Now picture the admirals of the Royal Navy, their uniforms crisp, their eyes fixed on charts of the North Sea. The Navy remains Britain's pride, the guarantor of its empire. No army could cross the Channel so long as the fleet patrols it. Yet ships cannot occupy Paris, cannot humble Berlin, cannot redraw borders on land. The admirals know their strength, but also their limits. A war against Germany now would be one of attrition, a blockade to strangle its trade, a struggle fought in colonies and seas, long and costly. Would Britain have the patience, the unity, the will? The Navy's cannons are ready, but the nation's heart hesitates, And in Berlin, German eyes watch the island carefully. Some argue that Britain should be wooed, its empire respected, its pride appeased. A Europe dominated by Germany but balanced by Britain at sea might prove stable, each empire secure in its sphere. Others scoff, insisting that Britain must be humbled, its navy checked, its colonies contested, its influence broken once and for all. The question of Britain is not only Britain's, it is Germany's as well, and the choices made on both sides will decide whether peace holds or rivalry deepens. The metaphor that best captures this moment is the Channel itself. Its waters churn with tides and winds, restless, never still, reflecting both sunlight and storm. It is a barrier, yet also a bridge, a constant reminder that Britain and Europe are bound together whether they wish it or not. In this alternate world, the Channel whispers uncertainty, its waves lapping at the shores with questions rather than answers. Imagine, for a moment, two futures. In the first, Britain accepts the Peace of Berlin, swallows its pride, and focuses on empire overseas. Trade continues, colonies flourish, and London remains the financial center of the world. Germany rules the continent, Britain rules the seas, and an uneasy balance settles like mist across Europe. In the second, Britain defies Germany, joining forces with Russia, or perhaps with America, building alliances to counter Berlin's dominance. The result is another struggle, longer and more bitter. A cold rivalry that could flare into open war at any time. Both futures shimmer on the horizon, both plausible, both dangerous. And what of the empire itself? In India, in Canada, in Australia, newspapers print the same headlines, their readers watching London's hesitation with concern. Colonies depend on Britain's strength, on its image as unshakable. If London bows to Berlin, what message does that send? Will colonies remain loyal, or will they question whether Britain's shield can still protect them? The question of Britain is also the question of empire, for its colonies are not merely possessions but pillars that hold up its global power. Night falls over London. Along the Thames, lamps flicker on, their reflections shimmering in the water. Big Ben tolls the hour, its sound deep and solemn. In the cabinet room, the debate pauses, the men weary, their voices hoarse. Outside, the city hums, uncertain, restless, alive with speculation. Across the Channel, Berlin waits, triumphant but wary, knowing that Britain's decision will decide the future. The silence that hangs between the two empires is like the pause before a storm, charged, heavy, unresolved. And yet, while ministers argue, while admirals brood, while citizens debate in pubs and colonies murmur across the seas, another aspect of the empire stirs, one not of politics or armies, but of culture. For as Germany's power spreads across Europe, so too does its influence in art, in science, in music. The world may be reshaped not only by treaties and machines, but by the softer currents of creativity. From Berlin's opera houses to Munich's galleries, from poets to physicists, the arts of a Kaiserreich begin to bloom, offering another vision of triumph. A cultural century led not by Paris or London, but by Berlin. From the heavy silence of cabinet rooms in London, where ministers wrestle with the question of empire and survival, our vision shifts to something softer, lighter, yet no less powerful. For while armies march and treaties are signed, a nation's true legacy often lies not only in the lines on maps, but in the works of its thinkers, its musicians, its poets, its scientists. The clatter of boots may echo for a season, but the notes of a symphony, the brushstrokes of a painting, the discovery of a principle in a quiet laboratory, they linger for centuries. And in this alternate history, where Germany has triumphed without defeat, the cultural flowering of a Kaiserreich preserved at its height takes on a different shape. Imagine walking along Unter den Linden at twilight. The gas lamps glow golden against the cobbled streets, and from open windows comes the sound of music pianos practicing nocturnes, violins weaving melodies that drift into the evening air. Theaters are alive with audiences, their applause spilling into foyers heavy with perfume and chatter. In the opera houses of Berlin and Munich, Wagner's works thunder beneath glittering chandeliers, not as nostalgic tributes, but as national triumphs, their heroic notes matched by the confidence of a victorious empire. The arts in this Germany are not burdened by the bitterness of defeat or the rage of revolution. They are nourished by pride, stability, and resources that flow steadily from empire and industry. Consider the universities, already vibrant in our reality, now freed from the disruptions of war and humiliation. In Göttingen, mathematicians continue their quiet revolutions, scribbling equations across chalkboards as students watch with wide eyes. In Heidelberg, philosophers debate long into the night, their words spilling into taverns where young men and women argue passionately over the meaning of history, of progress, of destiny. In Berlin, museums expand their collections, displaying treasures not looted but collected under the authority of a victorious power, their halls filled with both admiration and unease. Science and art intermingle here, each feeding the other, each supported by a state that sees culture as proof of its superiority. And what of the ordinary people, the shopkeepers, the clerks, the children learning to read? In this triumphant Kaiserreich, their daily lives are touched by culture in ways subtle yet profound. Cheaply printed books fill homes, bringing literature to families who once could afford only a Bible. Newspapers carry serialized novels that capture imaginations, stories of adventure in the colonies, romances set against the backdrop of victory. Children learn patriotic songs in schools, their voices rising in unison, bright with pride. In the evenings, families gather around gramophones, the scratchy notes of German composers filling living rooms with sound, weaving music into the fabric of ordinary life. Yet, triumph in culture, like triumph in politics, carries contradictions. Would this flourishing of art lead to openness, to creativity unbound, or would it become harnessed by the state, pressed into service as propaganda for empire and monarchy? Imagine posters with heroic images, operas infused with imperial symbolism, novels praising loyalty to crown and country. The arts can inspire, but they can also constrain, their beauty harnessed to power. In this world, where the Kaiser shines in his golden hour, culture may bloom magnificently, but always under the shadow of politics. Still, within that shadow, brilliance remains possible. A poet may write of love that transcends borders, even as the state demands loyalty. A painter may capture the quiet dignity of a peasant woman, even as official commissions glorify generals. A scientist may uncover truths about the universe that no emperor can control. Culture has always had a way of slipping free, of planting seeds that grow in unexpected directions. The Kaiserreich triumphant may attempt to guide its arts, but the arts will always whisper with voices beyond control. Now picture an evening in Berlin, in a cafe where smoke curls lazily and conversations hum. A young student reads aloud from Rilke, his words trembling yet beautiful. At the next table, artists sketch faces, their pencils darting across paper, capturing fleeting expressions. A violinist, traveling from hall to hall, plays softly in a corner, his music mingling with the clink of glasses. The mood is not revolutionary, but reflective, a sense of being at the center of something grand, of participating in a culture that sees itself as the envy of the world. And abroad, this cultural flowering has consequences too. French intellectuals, humiliated by defeat, look uneasily at German dominance in the arts as well as politics. British critics review German operas with grudging admiration, their words laced with envy. Across the Atlantic, Americans attend German lectures, buy German instruments, read German books, sensing that the cultural century belongs not to Paris or London, but to Berlin. Influence spreads not only through treaties and colonies, but through music and science, through the quieter channels of admiration and imitation. The metaphor that best describes this moment is that of light. Germany's culture shines like an electric lamp newly installed in a darkened room, casting brilliance outward. The light dazzles, illuminates, inspires, Yet it also casts shadows, deepening contrasts, revealing fractures where the glow does not reach. The arts of a triumphant Kaiserreich are luminous, but light, like fire, can burn as well as brighten. Still, for those who live in this imagined moment, the experience is intoxicating. To walk the streets of Berlin or Munich is to feel part of a golden age, a time when music, art, and science move in harmony with national pride. To sit in an opera house as the orchestra swells is to feel the heartbeat of a nation triumphant. To read the words of a poet is to glimpse truths that stretch beyond politics, truths that touch the soul. As midnight approaches, the city quiets. The theaters empty, the cafes close, the streets grow still. Yet the notes of music linger in the air, faint echoes drifting through the night, as if refusing to fade. In that lingering sound lies the promise of culture, that even when the lights dim, even when empires falter, the beauty created remains. And yet, as the echoes fade, another sound begins to stir, faint but insistent. Far from Berlin's boulevards, in the rugged mountains of the Balkans, voices rise once more, voices of old feuds and rivalries that no treaty, no symphony, no painting has ever silenced. For even as the arts of a Kaiserreich glow brightly, the Balkans whisper restlessly, reminding Europe that beneath triumphant culture, history's fractures remain unresolved. From the lamplit streets of Berlin, where music drifts through open windows and the hum of culture feels eternal, our vision shifts to a harsher landscape. The echoes of symphonies fade, replaced by the sharp cry of an eagle circling above stony ridges, the rushing of rivers through deep valleys, the murmurs of villages huddled beneath mountains that have witnessed centuries of strife. The Balkans, that turbulent crossroads of Europe, are restless again. No matter how tightly the treaties of Berlin redraw borders, no matter how triumphant the Kaiserreich imagines itself, the region whispers of unfinished business, of ancient grievances that no empire has ever fully silenced. Picture Sarajevo, its streets quiet beneath the shadow of minarets and church spires. In our real history, it was here that a bullet shattered peace in 1914, igniting a war that consumed empires. In this alternate world, where Germany triumphed swiftly and imposed its order, the spark has been extinguished, but the embers remain. Young men still gather in cafes, their voices low but fervent, speaking of independence, of national pride, of unity against foreign rule. Old rivalries between Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks simmer just beneath the surface, contained but not resolved. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, propped up by Berlin's victory, rules with wary vigilance, its soldiers patrolling streets that have never truly accepted them. The image is one of fragile calm. German and Austrian officials assure themselves that the Balkans are stable, secured by the weight of treaties and garrisons. But the land itself tells another story. In the mountains of Montenegro, rifles are hidden beneath blankets. In the valleys of Macedonia, villagers sing songs of heroes long dead, their words coated with defiance. In Belgrade, even if humbled, the Serbian spirit does not bow. It waits, patient, resilient, its silence heavier than speech. The Balkans are not conquered in the same way as Paris or Warsaw. They endure, stubborn and unyielding, their identity stronger than the empires that claim them. For Germany, the Balkans are both asset and burden. They offer access to the Mediterranean, influence over the Ottoman Empire, leverage against Russia. Yet they are also tender, dry, and volatile, ready to ignite with the smallest spark. In Berlin, strategists debate whether to bind the region with economic ties, building railways from Vienna to Istanbul, flooding markets with German goods, weaving prosperity into loyalty. Others argue for military vigilance, insisting that only the presence of troops can keep peace in a land so fractious. Both approaches, however, skirt the deeper truth that the Balkans resist because they remember, because their histories run deeper than maps or treaties. Consider the metaphor of echoes. The Balkans are full of them, echoes of battles, of uprisings, of songs sung by rebels in forests. Each echo may fade, but it never vanishes entirely. It waits to be answered. A German soldier standing guard in Sarajevo might hear nothing but silence, yet beneath that silence are echoes centuries old, waiting to resurface. Empires have come before the Ottomans, the Habsburgs, even Napoleon's shadow, but none have erased the echoes. The Kaiserreich, however triumphant, will be no different. Let us imagine a German officer traveling by train through the region. He gazes from the window as the landscape rolls past fields dotted with sheep, monasteries perched on cliffs, markets buzzing with color and voices. He admires the beauty, perhaps even believes the propaganda that German order has brought stability. Yet as the train slows at a station, he notices the eyes of the villagers watching him. Steady, unreadable. They accept his presence, but not his authority. He feels, for just a moment, the unease of a conqueror in a land that does not want to be conquered. And in the drawing rooms of Vienna, the Austro-Hungarian elite toast their survival. Without German victory, their empire might have crumbled, undone by internal fractures and external threats. Now, propped up by Berlin, they breathe easier, their monarchy preserved. Yet even they sense the fragility of their position. The Balkans remain a thorn in their side, a place where empire bleeds strength rather than gaining it. They look to Berlin for guidance, for protection, for reassurance that the region can be managed. But deep down, they know that no power, not even Germany triumphant, can silence the Balkans forever. What, then, are the possibilities? Perhaps in this alternate history, German diplomacy succeeds in weaving the region into a new order. Railways bring prosperity, markets open, schools spread literacy, and slowly the old feuds lose their edge. Perhaps a generation grows up under German oversight that sees opportunity rather than oppression. Peace in the Balkans could become a cornerstone of the Kaiserreich's stability, proof that even the most turbulent lands can be brought into order. Or perhaps the opposite occurs. Victory breeds arrogance, officials dismiss local grievances, soldiers enforce laws with heavy hands. Nationalist groups go underground, their silence hiding determination. A single assassination, a single uprising in a village, could set the region aflame once more. The Balkans, so often dismissed as peripheral, could again become the center of Europe's storms, dragging empires into conflicts they believe they control but never truly master. In this alternate world, the difference lies not in inevitability, but in choice and in the unpredictable nature of history's echoes. As night falls in the Balkans, the mountains stand dark against the sky, their peaks sharp beneath the stars. Villages glow faintly with firelight. Songs drift into the night, their melodies carrying pride and sorrow. German patrols march along roads, their boots steady, their rifles gleaming. The silence is uneasy, a calm that feels more like waiting than peace. The Balkans endure, restless, their whispers growing louder in the imagination of Europe. And just beyond, across the Bosphorus, another empire waits the Ottoman, weary but still alive, its minarets piercing the twilight sky of Istanbul. In Berlin's triumph, the question arises, what place does the Ottoman ally hold in this new order? Will Germany's victory preserve the sick man of Europe, breathing new life into its fading empire? Or will it exploit and reshape it, turning ancient lands into new instruments of power? From the restless whispers of the Balkans, our story moves naturally eastward, to the call to prayer that drifts across the waters of the Bosphorus, to the fate of an empire caught between worlds. From the restless echoes of the Balkans, where ancient rivalries whisper beneath mountain winds, our vision drifts southeast, across rivers and plains, to the strait that divides two worlds. The Bosphorus glimmers beneath the fading light of dusk, its waters carrying the reflection of domes and minarets, its currents whispering of centuries where empires rose and fell upon its shores. Istanbul, still, Constantinople, in the memories of some, still the heart of an empire weakened, yet enduring stands at the threshold of Europe and Asia. In this alternate world where Germany triumphed swiftly and decisively in the Great War, the Ottoman Empire finds itself lifted, not crushed, by history's tide. Picture the skyline of the city at sunset. The call to prayer drifts across rooftops, the deep voices of muezzins weaving with the cries of gulls circling the harbor. Ships from every corner of the empire lie at anchor in the Golden Horn, their masts swaying, their hulls creaking. German officers stroll along the docks, their uniforms gleaming, speaking briskly with Ottoman officials. Berlin and Istanbul, allies in triumph, now envision a partnership that might preserve what the world had long called the sick man of Europe. But what does preservation mean? Is it strength restored or merely prolonging decline? In Berlin's eyes, the Ottoman Empire is more than an ally, it is a key. Through the Bosphorus flows access to the Black Sea, to Russia's soft underbelly, to routes that connect Europe with the riches of Asia. Through Anatolia runs the dream of a railway stretching from Berlin to Baghdad, a steel artery carrying goods, troops, and influence. The Ottomans provide geography, position, leverage. Germany provides technology, advisors, and the aura of victory. Together they imagine reshaping the balance of the Middle East, perhaps even of the world, and yet the Ottoman Empire is not merely a pawn. Within its vast fraying borders live millions Turks, Arabs, Armenians, Kurds, Greeks, each with their own aspirations, each with grievances long ignored. In our true history, the empire collapsed under the strain of war, its territories carved apart, its people scattered. But in this imagined history, the empire is spared that humiliation, shielded by German success. The question then becomes, could it reform and modernize under Berlin's guidance? Could the Ottoman state transform from relic to partner, from fading empire to rejuvenated power? Imagine German engineers surveying the plains of Mesopotamia, their instruments glinting in the sun as they plan the Baghdad Railway. Tracks are laid across deserts and mountains, bridges rise above rivers, tunnels bore through rock. The sound of hammers echoes across valleys that have known caravans for millennia. With each mile of railway, Germany ties the Ottoman Empire closer to itself, its industry woven into the ancient fabric of the East. For the Ottomans, the railway is both promise and chain promise of modernization, chain of dependence. In Istanbul, the court debates fiercely. Some advisors welcome German influence, seeing in it the tools to reform the army, strengthen the state, and preserve sovereignty. Others grumble, fearing that Ottoman independence will be eroded, that Berlin's embrace is as suffocating as it is supportive. The Sultan himself, cloaked in tradition yet aware of decline, weighs these choices carefully. In the glow of German victory, partnership seems inevitable, yet beneath the surface lies unease. How long can two empires, one rising and one faltering, truly walk side by side? Consider the provinces. In Syria, in Mesopotamia, in Arabia, the air is thick with restlessness. Local leaders eye Istanbul with suspicion, their loyalties divided, their patience thin. In our world, these lands were reshaped by British promises and Arab revolts. But in this alternate reality, with Britain hesitant and Germany ascendant, such revolts may never ignite, or if they do, they may be crushed swiftly with German aid. Imagine German officers advising Ottoman garrisons, training troops, building fortifications. The revolts of the desert might falter before they ever begin, replaced by a fragile but enduring German-backed order. Yet another path is possible. Perhaps German triumph emboldens the Ottomans, but also stirs resentment among their subjects. Arab leaders promise reform, but seeing little change, may chafe under continued rule from Istanbul. Armenians, long marginalized, may still cry for justice, their voices louder now, in a world where empires pretend to promise stability. In such a world, the Ottomans may find themselves caught between their own ambitions and the rising tide of nationalism that no foreign ally can truly quell. The German alliance may strengthen the empire's armies, but armies cannot erase identities. Let us pause to imagine the streets of Istanbul in this alternate moment. Along the Grand Bazaar, merchants call out, selling carpets, spices, jewelry, their stalls vibrant with color and scent. German businessmen walk among them, their voices firm, their notebooks recording opportunities. At night, cafes hum with conversation in Turkish, Arabic, Greek, German voices mingling, sometimes harmonizing, sometimes clashing. A city of crossroads, of currents, of contradictions. Istanbul thrives on its diversity, even as its rulers struggle to control it. The presence of German allies adds yet another layer, one of modernity and discipline woven into a fabric already ancient and frayed. The metaphor that captures this alliance is the bridge. Istanbul itself is a bridge between Europe and Asia, stone and steel spanning waters that divide yet connect. Germany builds its own bridge here, linking its empire with the Ottoman, tying its destiny to a partner whose strength is uncertain. Bridges hold, but they also strain under weight. Will this bridge carry the burdens of empire, or will it collapse beneath them? The answer lies not in Berlin alone, but in the choices of Istanbul, in the resilience of provinces, in the restless murmurs of people far from palaces and parliaments. For Germany, a strong Ottoman Empire offers strategic depth, access to resources, and a partner in its rivalry with Britain and Russia. For the Ottomans, Germany offers technology, prestige, and survival. Yet in this partnership, the imbalance is clear. Berlin leads. Istanbul follows. The sick man of Europe, spared his deathbed, now lives tethered to German strength. Some may call this revival, others dependence. Either way, the empire survives, reshaped, its destiny bound to Berlin's triumph. As night settles over the Bosphorus, the waters shimmer with lantern light, reflecting the silhouettes of minarets and towers. The city breathes with a mixture of pride and unease, the sound of prayer bells mingling with the distant hum of German voices. In the distance, the Anatolian hills lie silent, their villages dark beneath the stars, their futures uncertain. The Ottoman Empire endures, but endurance is not the same as peace. The alliance with Germany shines brightly, but like all lights, it casts shadows, and just beyond those shadows, across the vast plains of Eastern Europe and deep within the factories of Russia, another force stirs. The Russian Empire, wounded by defeat, trembles with unrest. Workers mutter in factories, peasants grumble in villages, soldiers curse in barracks. Revolution whispers through the land, its hammer poised above history's anvil. From the Bosphorus we turn north again, to the restless heart of Russia, where the shadow of revolution falls long and dark. From the lantern-lit waters of the Bosphorus, where the Ottoman Empire clings to life beneath the embrace of Germany, our vision drifts northward and eastward, across forests and plains, into the immense, restless expanse of Russia. Here the story shifts from treaties and alliances to whispers and fists, from palaces gilded with chandeliers to factories blackened with soot. For in this alternate world where Germany triumphs swiftly, Russia does not simply bow to defeat. It trembles, fractures, and darkens, haunted by the shadow of revolution. Picture a factory in Petrograd on a winter morning. The windows are frosted over, the air inside thick with smoke and the clang of machinery. Men and women work with numb hands, their breath misting in the cold, their stomachs empty from rations that never suffice. They remember defeats at the front, stories of lost battles, rumors of German soldiers marching across fields that once seemed distant. Their anger simmers, not only at the Tsar and his government, but at a system that demands their labor while offering little in return. They murmur to one another in the pauses between shifts, their words cautious, but growing bolder. Change, freedom, justice. In our real history, it was defeat, hunger, and endless war that brought Russia to the brink in 1917. But in this imagined world, where the German war machine crushed its armies swiftly, the collapse may come even sooner. Humiliation burns deeply in a nation that considers itself vast and eternal. Soldiers retreating from the front spread bitterness through the countryside. Peasants, weary of taxes and conscription, turned their sides against landlords. Workers, emboldened by their misery, strike with louder voices. The revolution that erupted after years of suffering may, in this alternate timeline, ignite like dry tinder under a single spark. Yet revolution is never singular. It carries many faces, many possibilities. Suppose, in this world, the Bolsheviks never rise to dominance. Lenin, exiled and powerless, might never find the moment that history granted him in our reality. Instead, moderate reformers, liberals, or even military men could step into the vacuum left by the Tsar's abdication. Russia could transform not into a Soviet state, but into a fragile democracy under German pressure, or even into a series of smaller states carved from its immense territory. In this path, the world avoids Bolshevism, but it does not avoid instability. The shadow of revolution still looms, but its shape is unfamiliar. Another possibility lingers. Perhaps Germany, sensing opportunity, supports revolution selectively, guiding events to its advantage. German agents might whisper in the ears of reformers, or even radicals, promising aid in exchange for peace. A Russia reshaped not by ideology but by necessity could emerge, bound economically to Berlin, its sovereignty compromised. The shadow of revolution would still fall across the land, but it would fall in patterns convenient to the empire triumphant. History would turn, not toward the hammer and sickle, but toward a subtler dependence, where revolution births not independence, but a new form of vassalage. Let us pause in the Russian countryside. Snow falls softly upon wooden cottages, the silence broken by the bark of a distant dog, the creak of a frozen tree. Inside, peasants huddle around stoves, their faces lined with hardship. They speak of shortages, of conscription, of landlords who demand too much. The names of foreign rulers mean little here. What matters is hunger, and hunger is plentiful. In our history, these peasants became the raw fuel for revolution, their fury channeled by Bolshevik slogans. In this alternate world, their fury remains, but without Bolshevik discipline, it may burn in many directions at once. Into riots, into anarchic uprisings, into local movements that fracture rather than unify. In the palaces of Petrograd, the nobility tremble. The Tsar, already weakened by defeats, faces pressure from every side. Advisors urge him to abdicate, to allow his son or regency to save the monarchy. Others cling stubbornly to tradition, insisting that divine right cannot bend. In our world, Nicholas II clung too long and fell. In this world, his fall may come earlier, sharper, yet no less final. Perhaps he flees into exile, carried away by loyal guards. Perhaps he lingers as a figurehead, stripped of power, his dynasty reduced to symbols. The Romanovs, whose lines stretch back centuries, may survive in name but not in influence, their power extinguished by their own people rather than by foreign invaders. The metaphor that defines this moment is the hammer. In factories, hammers strike anvils, shaping metal with ringing force. In the countryside, hammers mend tools for peasants who labor in frozen soil. In politics, hammers fall upon thrones, shattering crowns that seemed eternal. Revolution is the hammer of history, blunt yet decisive, and in Russia's vastness, the hammer falls again and again, reshaping a land too immense to remain unchanged. And what of Germany in this vision? The Kaiser and his generals watched the Russian turmoil with satisfaction, seeing an old rival collapse. To them, Russia's weakness is victory confirmed, a guarantee that the East is open, its riches ripe for exploitation. Trains carry grain from Ukraine, oil from the Caucasus, timber from forests, all flowing westward. Yet even Berlin cannot control the chaos entirely. Refugees pour across borders, ideas spread faster than armies, instability seeps into neighboring lands. The shadow of revolution does not stop at the Russian frontier. It stretches outward, darkening all of Europe, threatening to undermine even triumph. Imagine Berlin in this moment, triumphant yet cautious. In the cafes, citizens read headlines of Russian unrest, shaking their heads with a mix of pity and superiority. The Russians cannot govern themselves, they mutter, better that Germany guide them. Yet beneath their pride lies unease, for revolutions are contagious. Workers in Berlin factories read the same headlines and wonder if change is possible at home. If peasants in Russia can defy tsars, why not workers in Germany defy employers? Victory has dulled discontent, but it has not erased it. The shadow of revolution, though born in Russia, creeps westward, a reminder that triumph is never absolute. As night falls over Russia, the snow glows faintly beneath the moon, fields stretching endless and silent. In cities, crowds gather with banners and torches, their chants rising into the cold air. In palaces, nobles peer from windows, their hands trembling as they hear the roar of their people. In villages, peasants whisper of land and freedom, their words carried by the wind. The shadow of revolution is everywhere, uncertain in shape, unpredictable in outcome, but undeniable in presence. And as that shadow deepens, Berlin turns once more to its own future. For even as revolutions topple thrones abroad, the Kaiser's throne seems secure at home, his dynasty basking in triumph, his heirs playing in gardens untouched by turmoil. From Russia's hammer to Berlin's palace, the story moves now to succession, to dynasty, to the children of victory who inherit not war, but empire. From the frostbitten streets of Petrograd, where revolution murmurs and factories and palaces tremble before angry crowds, our vision travels back westward to the heart of triumph. Berlin gleams still, its boulevards lined with flags, its palaces radiant with light, its people intoxicated by victory. Here the shadow of revolution seems distant, muffled by parades and prosperity. And at the center of this golden image stands Wilhelm II, the Kaiser, who now imagines himself not merely a monarch, but the architect of a new age. Yet even as he basks in glory, his thoughts turn inevitably toward the future, toward the dynasty that must preserve what he has won. Picture the gardens of the Neues Palais at Potsdam on a summer afternoon. Children run across manicured lawns, their laughter ringing like bells in the warm air. The Kaiser watches proudly, his uniform immaculate, his mustache twitching with satisfaction. His sons and grandsons chase one another beneath fountains and statues, their games innocent yet heavy with expectation. For in this alternate history, where the empire has triumphed, the Hohenzollern dynasty shines as brightly as it ever had, and the question is no longer whether the monarchy will endure, but how it will shape the century to come. In our real history, defeat fractured the dynasty. Wilhelm II abdicated, his line humiliated, his heirs reduced to exiles and figureheads. But here, his victory preserves the monarchy as the core of national pride. Schools teach children not only arithmetic and science, but loyalty to crown and empire. Portraits of the Kaiser hang in homes and classrooms, his image revered, his family idealized. Newspapers print photographs of royal weddings, christenings, celebrations, symbols of stability that reassure a people weary of conflict, yet proud of triumph. Yet dynasties are more fragile than they appear. The Kaiser's golden hour, though radiant, conceals uncertainty. For succession is never merely a matter of blood, it is a matter of character. His sons Wilhelm, Eitel Friedrich, Adalbert, August Wilhelm, Oscar, each carry their own ambitions, their own temperaments, their own flaws. In victory, they are princes of a confident empire, groomed for leadership, yet burdened by the weight of expectation. Will they preserve their father's vision, or will they falter beneath the enormity of it? Imagine the crown prince, Wilhelm, walking through the palace gardens at dusk. His uniform gleams, his boots polished, his stride purposeful. In this world of triumph, he is no longer haunted by failure, but elevated by promise. Courtiers bow, citizens cheer, diplomats address him with deference, yet in his heart, perhaps, there is uncertainty. How does one inherit not only a throne, but a legacy of conquest, of empire, of destiny fulfilled? The pressure is immense. and history has often shown that heirs raised in triumph rarely match the mettle of those hardened by struggle. The metaphor of inheritance is best captured in the image of a crown placed upon a young head. It shines with brilliance, it commands awe, but it is heavy, too heavy, sometimes, for shoulders not yet ready. In this alternate world, the Kaiser's heirs may inherit stability, but stability can stagnate. Without challenge, without failure, dynasties can grow complacent, out of touch, convinced of permanence. The gardens of Potsdam, with their fountains and laughter, may conceal the silence of future decline, and yet another vision is possible. Perhaps triumph breeds not arrogance, but responsibility. Perhaps the heirs, watching their father's reign, learn to balance pride with prudence. Raised in a world where Germany commands respect, they may dedicate themselves to preserving it not through recklessness but through careful stewardship. Imagine a future where the dynasty becomes a unifying symbol, a steady hand guiding modernization, reform, and expansion. The monarchy, far from fading, could become the very heart of a German century. Let us pause to picture life within the palace walls. The Kaiserin, Augusta Victoria, walks through corridors lined with portraits of ancestors, her footsteps soft against marble floors. She smiles as she listens to her children and grandchildren, her heart lightened by triumph after years of anxiety. In salons, courtiers whisper about the next generation, speculating on marriages, alliances, futures. Royal tutors teach young princes languages, history, the art of diplomacy, preparing them for roles in a world that seems destined to bend to their family's will. There is a sense of continuity here, of history flowing smoothly, unbroken by defeat. But outside those walls, the world is less certain. Workers still toil in factories, peasants still labor in fields, and not all cheer the dynasty with equal fervor. Some grumble that the monarchy benefits the privileged while ignoring the common man. Some whisper that victory has postponed reform rather than fulfilled it. The dynasty, while secure, is not immune to these undercurrents. Its heirs may inherit not only power but problems deferred, challenges unresolved, shadows concealed by the glow of triumph. The metaphor of laughter is apt here. In the gardens, the children's laughter is bright, untroubled, a sound of innocence. But beyond the hedges, beyond the gates, the world's laughter is mixed, joyful in places, bitter in others, mocking in some. Dynasties hear what they wish, but history hears everything. The heirs of the Kaiser may one day discover that the laughter they thought eternal was only an echo, fading into silence. Still, for this moment, the dynasty stands radiant. Imagine a grand procession through Berlin, the Kaiser at its head, his heirs following proudly, their uniforms gleaming, their horses stamping on cobbled streets. The people cheer, flowers fall from windows, bands play triumphant marches. It is a spectacle of continuity, of stability, of destiny. To those watching, it feels unbreakable, as if the monarchy will stand forever, as if the Kaiserreich's heirs will guide the world for centuries to come. But even as the royal procession fades into the distance, another sound rises, a new rhythm, mechanical and insistent. Beyond the palaces and gardens, beyond the parades and laughter, the future hums with invention. Engines roar, zeppelins drift across skies, laboratories glow with strange experiments. Technology, restless and relentless, promises to reshape the world in ways no dynasty can fully control. And so our story moves forward, from the heirs of empire to the machines of tomorrow, from the golden hour of monarchy to the dawning age of technology. From the palace gardens of Potsdam, where children laugh beneath fountains and the dynasty seems secure, our vision drifts outward once again. The laughter fades, replaced by a new sound, low at first, then growing louder, insistent, mechanical. It is the roar of engines, the hum of turbines, the whir of propellers cutting through the air. Above Berlin, zeppelins drift like silver whales, their shadows gliding over rooftops. In workshops and laboratories, sparks fly from machines. Glass tubes glow with strange light. Wires buzz with unseen energy. The empire, triumphant in war and secure in dynasty, now turns its gaze toward the future not with fear, but with hunger. This is the age of invention, the age of technology, the dream of tomorrow. Imagine the streets of Berlin in this alternate 1920s. Electric trams rattle along rails, their bells ringing as they weave between horse-drawn carriages that linger as relics of another age. Street lamps glow not with flickering gas, but with steady electric light, casting long reflections across wet cobblestones after rain. Crowds gather to watch demonstrations of automobiles, sleek, noisy, thrilling. German engineers boast of vehicles that will one day outpace horses, their wheels carrying families across countryside and cities alike. Factories in Stuttgart and Munich churn out engines with relentless precision, each bolt and gear a promise of speed, power, progress. Above it all, Zeppelins glide serenely, their vast frames majestic against the evening sky. In our world, their promise dimmed after disasters, but in this imagined history, backed by an empire confident and unshaken, they flourish. Airships become symbols of German triumph, carrying passengers from Berlin to Vienna, from Hamburg to Constantinople, perhaps even across oceans to New York. Picture elegant dining rooms within their cabins, passengers sipping wine while gazing down at fields and rivers sliding silently beneath them. The future, in this vision, feels weightless, suspended in clouds, yet progress does not linger only in transport. In laboratories across Germany, scientists work feverishly, their discoveries accelerated by funding and stability. Physics leaps ahead. Max Planck, Albert Einstein, and younger minds pursue theories that bend light and time, their chalkboards dense with symbols that open doors to the cosmos itself. In chemistry, breakthroughs lead to new medicines, synthetic materials, fertilizers that promise to feed millions. In medicine, X-rays and vaccines spread more quickly, saving lives once lost to disease. The empire that once wielded cannons now wields microscopes, its conquest turned inward, into the mysteries of nature. The metaphor for this moment is the engine itself, restless, powerful, unstoppable. Technology is not content to stand still. It demands fuel, it demands direction, it demands to be used. Germany, triumphant and confident, holds the throttle firmly. The question is not whether the engine will run, but where it will take the world. Let us pause to imagine a young German boy standing in a Berlin square, his eyes wide as a zeppelin passes overhead. He clutches a small toy, an automobile carved of wood, painted by his father. For him, the future feels boundless, a horizon not of fear, but of wonder. He dreams not of trenches or battlefields, but of skies filled with airships, roads humming with cars, cities glowing with electric light. His imagination is the true victory of this alternate history, a childhood defined not by deprivation and war, but by possibility. But technology, like fire, can warm or burn. The same laboratories that produce dyes and medicines can also produce explosives deadlier than any before. The same engines that power cars can power tanks. The same theories that explain the atom can unlock terrifying energies. In our history, war drove invention, pushing nations to harness science for destruction. In this alternate history, where Germany triumphed early, perhaps invention serves peace, for a time civilian marvels, cultural pride, economic prosperity, yet ambition and rivalry never rest, and the temptation to turn invention toward power lingers always. A zeppelin that carries passengers can just as easily carry bombs. A chemical that heals can just as easily poison. The empire, standing at the frontier of technology, faces choices that define not only its future, but the world's. And rivals watch closely. Britain, though chastened, invests in its own science, unwilling to be eclipsed. America, its vast resources untouched by war, pushes ahead with industry and invention. Its factories humming in Detroit, its laboratories glowing in Princeton. Japan, ambitious and determined, studies German models, and adapts them to its own ends. The dream of tomorrow is not Germany's alone, it is a global contest, a race not only for dominance but for survival. Technology, once a wonder, becomes a competition, its pace relentless, its stakes immense. Still, for the moment, Germany revels in progress. Imagine the halls of the Deutsches Museum in Munich, filled with exhibits of engines, turbines, and models of aircraft. Families walk through, their eyes shining, their voices filled with pride. School children crowd around demonstrations of electricity, gasping as sparks leap from coils. Newspapers print illustrations of future cities, with towers of glass and steel, with streets filled by cars and skies crowded with zeppelins. The line between reality and imagination blurs, and the future feels close enough to touch. And yet, even as machines hum and discoveries multiply, whispers of unease drift beneath the triumph. Some philosophers warn that technology without wisdom is dangerous, that progress without restraint leads to ruin. A few poets write of alienation, of workers turned into cogs in the machine, of cities where light blinds more than it illuminates. Amid triumph, dissenting voices ask, is this future truly golden, or is it a mirage that hides new perils? The empire listens, but perhaps does not hear, its attention fixed on engines that roar too loudly to notice whispers. As dusk falls over Berlin, the sky glows with more than sunset. Electric lamps flicker to life, zeppelins hover with lanterns glowing, automobiles rumble through streets, factories cast fiery light into the night. It is a vision of modernity, of confidence, of destiny. The Kaiserreich, preserved in triumph, imagines itself not only master of Europe, but master of the future. And yet, across the Atlantic, in the towers of New York and the factories of Detroit, another rhythm grows louder, a hum that will not be ignored. For while Germany embraces the technology of tomorrow, America too rises, watching, waiting, ready to claim the century as its own. From the glowing lamps of Berlin, where zeppelins drift through skies and laboratories hum with discovery, our vision crosses once again the restless Atlantic. The waters glisten with moonlight, waves beating against ships that carry goods, ideas, and rumors of triumph. On the far shore, New York rises into view, its towers stretching skyward, its streets alive with energy. In our true history, the 20th century became known as the American century, shaped by Wall Street's wealth, Hollywood's dreams, and Washington's power. Yet in this alternate world, where Germany triumphed flawlessly, America does not rise so easily, so unchallenged. Its century is interrupted, its dominance deferred, its future reshaped by a Kaiserreich whose shadow stretches far across the ocean. Picture Wall Street in the 1920s. Brokers in crisp suits shout orders, their voices blending into a storm of ambition. Tickers rattle, papers flutter, fortunes rise and fall in minutes. In our world, this was the heartbeat of an America that believed itself destined to lead. In this alternate world, however, the pulse is less certain. Reports arrive daily of German dominance, new factories in the Ruhr, zeppelins crossing Europe, colonies in Africa humming with railways and mines. Investors hesitate, wondering if America can compete with a continent unified under Berlin's economic web. Confidence remains, but pride is unsettled. The dream of an uncontested future feels suddenly fragile. For America, isolation has always been both shield and limitation. Its people prefer to look inward, to cultivate their own prosperity, their own vast frontiers. Yet isolation is harder to maintain when across the ocean another power claims mastery not only of armies but of industry, science, and trade. The American farmer in Iowa, who once sold grain freely to Europe, now finds markets distorted by German influence. The factory worker in Detroit, proud of the automobile industry's growth, hears whispers that German cars, backed by victory and resources, may flood global markets. The rhythm of progress continues, but it is interrupted by the awareness that another nation has already seized the initiative. And what of politics? Imagine President Warren Harding, or perhaps Calvin Coolidge after him, seated in the Oval Office, staring at maps where Europe gleams under German control. Their speeches still praise American exceptionalism, but in private their words are tinged with caution. Should America confront Germany, risking rivalry that could strain resources and unity, or should it accept a role as second among equals, focusing on the Western Hemisphere, content to let Europe belong to Berlin? Each choice carries consequences, and in this world, America's certainty is diminished. Culturally, too, the balance shifts. In our history, jazz, Hollywood, films, and skyscrapers defined the modern age, their influence spreading across oceans. In this imagined path, Berlin competes fiercely. German cinema, already innovative in our reality, flourishes with state support, exporting visions of modernity to audiences from Vienna to Istanbul, perhaps even to Paris and London. German orchestras tour abroad. German universities attract students who might otherwise have gone to Harvard or Yale. The cultural century, once America's, now feels shared, contested, perhaps even stolen. The Statue of Liberty still raises her torch, but across the ocean Berlin shines with its own brilliance. Yet America is not weak, it is restless. The country still possesses vast resources, boundless land, an energetic population. Its industries roar, its cities grow, its ambition smolders. The interruption of its century does not erase its potential. It merely redirects it. Perhaps, in this world, America builds strength more cautiously, avoiding entanglements while preparing for the day when its power can no longer be denied. Or perhaps pride pushes it sooner, drawing the United States into rivalry with Germany decades earlier than in our timeline. The clash of titans, an industrial America against a triumphant Germany, looms as one of history's great possibilities. Let us imagine a family in Chicago, gathered around a radio in the evening. The father listens intently to broadcasts about Europe. His brow furrowed, the mother worries about prices at the market, rising as trade shifts. The children dream of the future. One wants to be a pilot, another an engineer. Their world is filled with opportunity, yet colored by unease. They hear of German airships crossing skies, of German scientists winning prizes, of German colonies thriving. Their own nation is strong, yet they sense that history's spotlight is fixed elsewhere. The American century they were promised feels postponed, its brightness dimmed by Berlin's glow. And abroad, others watch America as closely as America watches them. In Berlin, the Kaiser and his ministers debate the Republic across the sea. Some dismiss it as a giant content to sleep, an island of democracy too distant to threaten Europe. Others warn that America's rise is inevitable, that one day it will challenge German supremacy as Britain once did. In Tokyo, Japanese leaders study both nations, calculating whether to ally with Germany or resist, whether to balance against America or Germany, sensing opportunity in rivalry. The world, once fragmented, now orbits around two suns, Berlin and Washington, each brilliant, each wary of the other. The metaphor for this moment is the horizon. For America, the horizon once seemed clear, open, waiting to be claimed. In this alternate world, the horizon is crowded, obscured by another power whose reach stretches far and wide. America sees the future still, but it sees it through the haze of competition, through the shadow of another's triumph. The horizon is not gone, but it is contested, and yet, even within this interruption, possibilities shimmer. Perhaps Germany and America, wary but pragmatic, agree to divide the world, Berlin commanding Europe and Africa, Washington commanding the Western Hemisphere and Pacific. A cold peace could hold, fragile yet enduring, where rivalry simmers but open war is avoided. Or perhaps mistrust festers, leading to confrontation not in Europe, but in trade disputes, in naval races, in competition for influence across Latin America and Asia. The interruption of the American century does not erase destiny, it merely complicates it, turning inevitability into uncertainty. As night falls on New York, Lights flicker in skyscraper windows, their reflections dancing on the Hudson River. The city hums with life, with jazz spilling from clubs, with cars honking along crowded avenues, with dreams both restless and ambitious. Across the ocean, Berlin too glows with light, its boulevards filled with parades, its laboratories alive with invention. Two cities, two nations, each believing in its own greatness, each shaping a future that cannot easily be shared. And from this rivalry, our story widens once more. For beyond America's hesitation and Germany's triumph lies the broader world, now tied together by treaties, colonies, trade, and technology. The question arises, can Germany transform its victories into a global order, a Pax Germanica that endures? Or will the lines on maps, the treaties signed in Berlin, and the ambitions of empires prove brittle beneath the weight of history? From New York's restless towers, we return to summits and councils, to the vision of a German world order proclaimed in marble halls and diplomatic gatherings. From the restless hum of New York's skyscrapers, where ambition clashes with the shadow of Berlin, our vision crosses back over the ocean once more. Here, in marble halls and gilded chambers, diplomats gather beneath chandeliers, their voices murmuring across polished tables. The maps of Europe have already been redrawn, colonies absorbed, borders shifted. Yet the question remains, can Germany transform its battlefield triumphs into something lasting, into a global order that secures not just victory, but permanence? It is here, in summits and councils, that the dream of a Pax Germanica takes form, a vision not only of dominance, but of stability, an attempt to forge rules for a world remade in Berlin's image. Imagine a grand conference in the Reichstag, its halls heavy with banners, the air rich with pomp and ceremony. Delegates from allied and subject states sit uneasily, their faces a mixture of deference and resentment. Representatives of Austria-Hungary, their empire preserved by German arms, speak with cautious gratitude. Ottoman envoys, dressed in traditional robes, yet keen to show modernity, whisper with German officers about railways and trade. From Belgium, from Poland, from the Baltic states, delegates arrive not as equals but as subordinates, their signatures expected, their autonomy curtailed. Germany sits at the head of the table, its ministers dictating terms, its generals looming like shadows at the edges. The scene is one of grandeur, yet also of fragility. For what is a world order? It is not merely treaties on paper, but a system that convinces others of its legitimacy. Britain's empire endured for centuries, not only because of ships and soldiers, but because its rule, however contested, carried a certain inevitability. Rome itself lasted because its authority seemed natural, its roads and laws woven into daily life. Germany's challenge, in this alternate history, is not only to win but to persuade, to transform triumph into acceptance. Can it succeed, or will its order be brittle, a structure held together by fear rather than trust? Consider the economic vision of Mitteleuropa, long dreamed of by German thinkers. A vast economic bloc stretching across Central and Eastern Europe, tied together by railways, tariffs, and treaties. In this alternate path, such a vision becomes reality. Goods flow from Ukraine's fields, from Polish mines, from Baltic forests, all into Germany's markets. German banks extend credit, German investors guide industry, German merchants dominate trade. On maps drawn in Berlin, the empire appears not only as a nation, but as the heart of a continental system. To its architects, this is stability, prosperity, destiny fulfilled. To others, it is dependence, subjugation, the slow suffocation of sovereignty, and beyond Europe, the order extends outward. In Africa, Germany's colonies swell with railways and ports, their resources feeding the furnaces of the Ruhr. In Asia, German influence stretches through Qingdao and the Pacific Islands, clashing with Japanese ambition and American suspicion. At international summits, German delegates speak with authority once reserved for London or Paris, their voices calm, confident, unyielding. The image is of a world no longer balanced but tilted, its weight pressing toward Berlin. Yet even within triumph, dissonance stirs. France, humiliated but unbroken, nurtures resentment in silence. Its artists and intellectuals whisper of revenge. Its military officers train quietly, waiting for a chance to rise again. Russia, fractured by revolution, may seem subdued, yet instability there could spill across borders, threatening Germany's carefully drawn lines. Britain, though hesitant, still commands the seas, still holds vast colonies, still harbors pride that will not vanish easily. And America, restless and watchful, grows by the year, its century delayed but not denied. A German world order may stand proudly in its first decades, yet it is built on shifting sands, each grain a potential crack in the foundation. The metaphor here is that of a great clock. In Berlin, the gears turn smoothly, each cog polished, each spring wound tight. The chimes ring with perfect regularity, a symbol of order, precision, permanence. But clocks, however beautiful, depend on constant maintenance. A single fault in a gear, a spring wound too tightly, can bring the whole mechanism to a halt. Germany's order, though grand, is such a clock beautiful, intricate, impressive, yet vulnerable to flaws both internal and external. Let us imagine ordinary lives within this world order. A shopkeeper in Warsaw, his shelves filled with German goods, sells to customers who grumble about prices set in Berlin. A farmer in Ukraine, his grain carried away by trains, wonders why his family still struggles while German factories thrive. A student in Prague, attending a German-sponsored university, admires the science and literature he studies, yet feels his language and culture slipping beneath the weight of another's dominance. For the people who live within it, the German world order is not always triumph, it is often compromise, resentment, longing, and within Germany itself, pride flourishes. Citizens believe they have secured peace, prosperity, stability. They attend rallies where flags wave, listen to speeches of destiny, marvel at inventions that promise endless progress. The sense of inevitability is intoxicating. To many, the world order feels natural, eternal, a reflection of Germany's rightful place. Few suspect how fragile such certainty can be, how quickly it can dissolve when challenged. As night falls on another Berlin summit, the chandeliers dim, the delegates depart, the marble halls fall silent. Outside, the city glows with electric light, carriages and automobiles rattling along cobbled streets, zeppelins floating above like lanterns in the sky. It is a picture of order, of stability, of triumph preserved. And yet, in the quiet between footsteps, one can hear the faint rustle of maps, the shifting of borders not yet settled, the whispers of nations unwilling to remain subordinate forever. And so the story spirals back to where it began, to the possibility that no empire, however triumphant, can silence history's uncertainties. For while the German world order may dominate in the short term, the century itself remains vast, unpredictable, alive with forces that no treaty or army can fully contain. From Berlin summits, our vision widens once more, stepping back from halls and maps to gaze at the world entire. And in that global view, the question returns, what if everything had gone perfectly for Imperial Germany? What then would the 20th century have become? From the marble halls of Berlin, where treaties are signed and summits proclaim a Pax Germanica, our vision drifts outward, rising high above the continent. Below us, Europe glimmers in electric light, Berlin radiant at the center, Paris subdued, London uncertain, Vienna still intact, Istanbul breathing anew. The map appears stable, the world seemingly ordered. Yet the air trembles, as though the earth itself remembers that nothing built by men endures forever. And so, in this final turning of our story, we circle back to the very beginning, to the mud of 1914, to the guns of the Western Front, to the dawn that in our reality brought only slaughter. For now, we must ask once more, with the full weight of speculation behind us, what if everything had gone perfectly for Imperial Germany? Picture again the fields outside Paris in September 1914. German soldiers march with steady boots, their uniforms immaculate, their spirits high. The French army reels, the capital falters, the flag of the Kaiser rises where tricolor once waved. In our world, the moment passed, the Marne held, the war dragged on into years of trenches and ruin. But in this alternate dream, that dawn becomes victory, swift and complete. From that moment, history unwinds into a different thread, woven not with barbed wire and mustard gas, but with triumph, stability, and order, or so it seems. We have followed that thread through 20 layers, spiraling outward. We have seen Paris silenced, London hesitating, Africa and Asia drawn into Berlin's orbit. We have imagined Russia collapsing under revolution, the Ottoman Empire propped up by German arms, the dynasty of the Hohenzollerns secure in golden gardens. We have heard the hum of factories, the roar of engines, the voices of colonies restless, the whispers of Britain uncertain, the gaze of America interrupted. We have sat in summits where Germany dictated peace, and in lecture halls where German science promised to remake the world. Each vision is coherent, each plausible, each shimmering with possibility. And yet, as we stand at the end of this journey, none of them feels final. For history is not a machine that can be wound to a single outcome. It is a living current, full of eddies and divergences, chance and choice. Even in this world where Germany triumphed without error, uncertainty reigns. Would the peace imposed in Berlin have held, or would resentment fester until another war erupted? Would the colonies have remained obedient, or would their drums have beaten louder, calling for freedom? Would America have remained in watchful isolation, or would it have risen sooner to challenge German supremacy? Would the Kaiser's heirs have preserved his vision, or squandered it through arrogance and complacency? Each question hangs unanswered, like a note unresolved at the end of a symphony. The metaphor for this conclusion is the echo. Victory shouts loudly, its sound carrying across fields and cities. But in time the shout fades, and what remains is the echo distant, haunting, elusive. The echo of German triumph in this imagined world resounds still, in the silent streets of Paris, in the restless markets of Africa, in the smoky factories of Berlin, in the watchful gaze of New York. But echoes are not solid. They are reminders of something that might have been, vibrations of possibility fading into silence. Let us pause one final time to imagine the world in 1950 had Germany's victory endured. Perhaps Europe is stable under Berlin's hand, its people living in prosperity, its colonies still tethered, its rivals cautious. Or perhaps Europe seethes beneath the surface, its nations resentful, its colonies in revolt, its balance trembling. Perhaps the world avoids the horrors of fascism, of the Holocaust, of a Cold War between America and the Soviet Union. Or perhaps those horrors are replaced by others, different yet no less terrible conflicts born of arrogance, resistance, pride. The possibilities branch endlessly, like paths in a forest, each unseen beyond the bend. And so we end where we began, with a dawn on the Western Front. The soldiers wait, their breath misting in the air, their rifles cold in their hands. The horizon glows faintly, the moment before history unfolds. In our world, that glow heralded stalemate and ruin. In this world, it brought victory and triumph. Yet in both worlds, the dawn was only the beginning, never the end. For history does not rest in victories or defeats. It rests in the lives of people, in the choices they make, in the uncertainties they cannot control. As the light spreads across the fields, the guns remain silent in this dream. The empire stands, the Kaiser smiles, the future seems assured. And yet, if you listen closely, you can still hear the faint echo of what might have been the echo of triumph, the echo of resentment, the echo of possibility itself. It fades slowly, carried away by wind and time, leaving us with the same question that opened our journey. What if everything had gone perfectly for Imperial Germany? The answer is not one but many, spiraling outward like ripples on water, inviting us not to know but to imagine. And as you close your eyes, letting these echoes drift into silence, you may find yourself carried into dreams, where history's paths unfold differently, where empires rise and fall again, where dawn always waits on the horizon.